Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay. We had a technical issue. Bienvenue tout le monde. As we begin our meeting today, and on behalf of Ottawa City Council, I wish to acknowledge that Ottawa is built on unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the peoples and land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation and honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. I'll now ask the committee coordinator to do a roll call, please.
Councillor Luloff.
Good morning.
Councillor Dudas.
Lisi.
Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor Gower.
Good morning.
Councillor Tierney. Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor Leeper.
Good morning.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Menard.
Here.
Councillor DeRuse.
Here.
Vice Chair Kitts.
Here.
Mayor Sutcliffe.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest? All right, confirmation of minutes from our meeting on February 6th. Are the minutes confirmed? Item 4 is the Finance and Corporate Services Department Statement of Remuneration, Benefits, and Expenses paid to members of council and council appointees. There is a technical amendment from Vice Chair Kitts, which I think we can deal with quickly, if that's all right with everyone. Vice Chair Kitts.
Whereas on February 23rd, 2024, the report titled 2023 Statement of Remuneration, Benefits, and Expenses paid to members of council and council appointees, listed as item 4.1 on the Finance and Corporate Services Committee Agenda 12 for the meeting of March 5th, 2024, was circulated to members of council and staff and posted on ottawa.ca. And whereas a correction required to document 2, Statement of Remuneration and Expenses paid to council appointees, was identified after the agenda and meeting documents were published on February 23rd, 2024. And whereas at the top of page 2 in document 2, the total honorarium listed for each member of the Elections Compliance Audit Committee was reported as $2,350 for each member, when in fact it was $2,175 for each member. And whereas a revised document 2 with the above noted correction was recirculated to members of council and staff and reposted on ottawa.ca on February 27th, 2024. Therefore, be it resolved that pursuant to subsection 89.3 of the procedure bylaw, the updated document 2 be added to the above noted report for today's meeting.
Thank you, Vice Chair Kitts. Is that carried? Carried. And is the report received as amended? Received. Item 5 is Legal Services, Comprehensive Legal Services Report for the period July 1st to December 31st. Is that received? Item 6 is Office of the City Clerk. 6.1, City Representation and Delegate Attendance at Municipal Conferences and Trade Shows in 2024. And we have a motion from Vice Chair Kitts on attendance at the FCM meeting.
Whereas the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is hosting its annual conference and trade show from June 6th to June 9th, 2024 in Calgary, Alberta, and whereas the City of Ottawa currently has 2 representatives on the FCM board, Councillor Tim Tierney, who serves as 3rd Vice President, and Councillor Lane Johnson as Ottawa's representative, and whereas in accordance with its term of reference, the Finance and Corporate Services Committee annually approves the attendance of a limited number of councillors to join the mayor and council representatives in the city's delegation to the FCM conference, whose travel can be funded from the from the council administration budget. And whereas the office of the city clerk has recommended the Finance and Corporate Services Committee approve the attendance of 4 members of council in addition to the mayor, the 2 council representatives. Whereas following a circulation for expressions of interest from the office of the city clerk, 11 members of council expressed an interest in attending the conference. And whereas it is beneficial to give members representing different areas of the city the opportunity to participate in municipal conferences over the course of the term of council, therefore be it resolved that the Finance and Corporate Services Committee approve the attendance of the following members at the FCM conference in addition to the mayor and 2 council representatives, Councillor Laura Dudas, Councillor Ralston King, Councillor George Derues, and Councillor Alan Hubley.
Thank you, Vice Chair Kitts. Is that carried? Oh, okay. Question from Councillor Brockington. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to know, given the strong interest is likely to continue in subsequent years, how we are going to ensure that there is sort of an equitable opportunity for members. Are we noting who's already attended this term of council and then priority is going to be provided to other councillors, or what's sort of the strategy going forward?
So yes, and in fact, we took into account who went last year when we proposed the names for this year. Next year's event, I understand, will be in Ottawa, so there won't be a travel component to it. We should be okay next year, but that will always be a consideration.
So in 2026, priority will be given to people who have not yet traveled for
Correct.
FCM.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is the motion carried? And then the item as amended, is that carried? Okay. Item 6.2, French Language Services Advisory Committee 2024 to 26 Work Plan. Is that carried? Yes. 6.3, Status Update Finance and Corporate Services Committee Inquiries and Motions. Is that received? Item 7.1 is the Economic Development Strategy and Action Plan. We're going to hold that. Item 7.2 is designate leased spaces as municipal capital facilities. Is that carried? 7.3, approval to expropriate lands, Earl Grey Drive Extension Project. Is that carried? 7.4, approval to expropriate lands, Bank Street Rehabilitation Project. Is that carried? 7.5 is delegation of authority for the acquisition and sale of land and property from the 1st of July to December 31st, 2023. Is that received? Item 8.1 is the corporate sponsorship and advertising policies. We'll hold that. Item 9.1 is the Canada North Nuisance Mosquito Control Program. And, okay. Is that carried? Carried. And then there are no in-camera items. I'll note the information that was previously distributed. And item 12, we'll just deal with this now before we go back to the held items, is a motion for Havenly Gateway feature. And there is a motion moved by Vice Chair Kitts on behalf of Councillor Lowe. Is that carried? Okay, great. Thank you. So we will go back to item 7.1, which is the Economic Development Strategy and Action Plan. And I think we're going to start with a presentation. Good morning, team. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
All right, good morning, Mayor and members of Council. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to present the Economic Development Strategy and Action Plan to you all today. Here with me this morning are Shayla Doherty and Cindy Van Buskirk from the Economic Development Services team, and we're here to do the presentation and answer any questions that you might have on the strategy as it unfolds. I'll give just a brief overview. The strategy and action plan was developed over the past year in response to the important economic challenges and opportunities that are facing our city in a post-pandemic and evolving economic climate as we move forward. The strategy reflects considerable stakeholder engagement, which has also supported the establishment of priorities and actions, which you will hear more about in this course of this presentation. These priorities and actions are inherently practical and they are tactical in nature. However, they are also intended to inspire and lay a foundation for creativity and innovation. So I'd like to turn it over to Shayla, who's going to walk you through the strategy. Thanks, Shayla.
Thanks for the introduction, David, and good morning, councillors and mayor. We can go to the next slide, please. So the staff report in front of you this morning has two recommendations. The first is to approve the economic development strategy and action plan as outlined in the report, and the second is to reaffirm partner funding and approve the continuation of two economic development grant programs. Invest Ottawa, the Ottawa Film Office, and the Ottawa Music Industry Coalition all receive annual operating funding from the city to advance sector-specific priorities and programming. The two annual application-based grant programs are the Community Economic Development Grant Program and the BIA Grant Program. The annual funding amounts for the partners and the grants are listed on the slide. Next slide, please. The Economic Development Strategy and Action Plan supports the 2022 to 2026 term of council priority, a city with a diversified and prosperous economy. It also provides a framework to guide Ottawa's economic growth, prosperity, diversification, and resiliency. It's also intended to be a roadmap to help prioritize the allocation of city resources for economic development. This roadmap builds upon well-established partnerships and programs and introduces new strategic priority areas and actions to advance the city's economic competitiveness, reputation, and quality of life. Next slide, please. The strategy was developed using a three-phased approach. The first phase was the establishment of a vision statement and 8 guiding principles. This helped focus the strategy and provide local context and a lens for economic implications and opportunities. The vision statement and guiding principles are described in document 2. The second phase was an economic and trend analysis, which provided an assessment of Ottawa's economy and key industries, including our knowledge-based industries, tourism and creative industries, and small business. This phase also included a review of Ottawa's competitive advantages, opportunities, and challenges, as well as post-pandemic implications. The third phase was stakeholder engagement. We consulted with partners, stakeholders, and the broader business community to contextualize, validate, and prioritize economic challenges and opportunities. We also sought ideas around initiatives and actions to include in the strategy. Engagement was completed through partner interviews, group workshops, an online survey, and input from the Mayor's Economic Summit held last year. Lastly, we established a sponsor group to provide input, feedback, and sector expertise at each phase. Next slide, please. The strategy reflects a continuation of our collaborative approach to economic development. Economic development programming in Ottawa is delivered by both the city, so economic development services, and by many well-established partner organizations, each responsible for advancing sector or regional priorities within the larger ecosystem. The city key partners range from our funded service delivery partners to post-secondary institutions, the NCC, and more. The strategy implementation relies upon continued collaboration with all these partners. Next slide, please. The strategy also builds upon a strong foundation of existing economic development programs and initiatives that will continue to support our economic priorities. Examples include our Rural Economic Development Strategy, which will be updated later this year to align with this strategy and reflect any input received from the upcoming Rural Summit. The Nightlife Economy Action Plan, which was approved by Council last year and includes the establishment of the Nightlife Commissioner, is also part of our existing programs. Document 5 of the staff report more fully describes these programs and services. Next slide, please. The strategy includes 7 new priority areas. These priorities reflect feedback gathered during the consultation phase and consider Ottawa's economic challenges, opportunities, and strengths. Each priority has a stated objective, as well as a series of corresponding actions to be delivered over the ongoing, the short, so 1 to 3 years, and medium term, 4 to 5 years. Each action will have its own associated work plan to guide strategy implementation. I will provide an overview of each priority and some sample actions. You will note that the priorities are listed in numerical order. However, this does not reflect their order of importance. The strategic priority and actions are more fully described in the staff report in document 1. Next slide, please. The objectives of the partnership and collaboration priority is to work collaboratively with our partners to align priorities, enable inclusive and equitable economic development, and cultivate a one-region approach for Ottawa-Gatineau. One action, which aligns with the city's anti-racism strategy, is to cultivate new relationships with diverse stakeholders, focusing on those that represent Indigenous, racialized, immigrant, and Francophone communities, including the Odawa Indigenous Hub and the Changemaker Hub for Black entrepreneurs. Another action is to establish an economic partner roundtable to facilitate ongoing collaboration and information exchange, as well as to provide expertise and guidance on city economic development policies and programming. Next slide, please. City building projects are large-scale transformational projects such as destination and cultural attractions, events and sporting facilities, and healthcare infrastructure. These support and enable economic activity and are important to the city's long-term economic growth and vibrancy. They are also a critical component of quality of life and the attraction and retention of investment, talent, and visitors to Ottawa. One of the actions in the strategy includes working proactively with our partners to identify and support projects that advance Ottawa's key economic sectors, including an innovation district, a soundstage for Ottawa's film and television industry, and a new competition-sized aquatic and athletics facility for major events. Next slide, please. The objective for the connectivity priority is to improve transportation connectivity to and from and within Ottawa to attract and grow investment, enable economic activity, and support equitable participation in the economy. Sample actions for this priority include capitalizing on Ottawa's strength as a high-tech hub and supporting innovation in transportation and smart mobility through Invest Ottawa's Area X.0. It also includes identifying opportunities to stimulate transit usage to access downtown businesses and amenities with an emphasis on the nightlife economy. And finally, it includes advocating for continued investment in air service development. Next slide, please. The talent priority objective is to strengthen Ottawa's ability to attract, develop, and retain a workforce that meets current and future employment needs. Talent is a competitive strength for Ottawa with a highly educated and bilingual workforce and the highest concentration of tech talent in North America. However, an aging population, global competition for talent, and skills shortages have resulted in recruitment and retention challenges. Although there are several organizations in Ottawa that provide specific talent-related programs and services, there is no one organization that takes a broad and coordinated approach to talent attraction and retention. To address this, one action includes undertaking a comprehensive labor market assessment to fully understand Ottawa's workforce needs. Another action includes working with our partners to develop resources to connect talent to opportunity, such as the creation of a talent attraction campaign and resource portal for employers and job searchers. And lastly, we will work with our post-secondary institutions on student attraction, co-op, and postgraduate retention. Next slide, please. As we know, the pandemic significantly impacted the nature of work, our visitor economy, and socioeconomic conditions. For Ottawa's downtown and the Byward market, both key employment, residential, and tourist areas, this has resulted in a decreased daytime workforce, foot traffic, and overall economic activity, as well as escalating social issues and safety concerns. With a significant portion of the downtown workforce employed in the public sector, now working either remote or hybrid, a proactive approach is required to reimagine and rebalance our downtown. This means recognizing that future resiliency will be dependent on the increase in diversity of economic activity, including cultural vibrancy, tourism, placemaking, livability, and safety. Significant work is already underway to explore opportunities for revitalization. This work includes a recent report from the Downtown Revitalization Task Force and an Ottawa Downtown Action Plan led by the Ottawa Board of Trade and the Canadian Urban Institute in partnership with the city and our other partners. Sample actions to support this work and downtown broadly include establishing a downtown internal tactic team to coordinate city downtown revitalize efforts, prioritizing high-impact, low-cost public realm improvements, marketing downtown to residents and visitors, showcasing our neighborhoods, small businesses, and events, and coordinating the celebrations for the 200th anniversary for the founding of Ottawa Bytown in 2026 and the Byward Market in 2027. Next slide, please. Advancing Ottawa's place branding efforts will help grow the city's reputation and attract investment, talent, and visitors. A city's brand, like any corporate brand, is a highly valuable tool that reflects the essence of what Ottawa is and what Ottawa aspires to be. During the last term of council, the city and Ottawa Tourism worked with an international consultant to uncover Ottawa's place DNA and define and develop the city's brand identity, themes, and framework. To further advance Ottawa's place brand, particularly post-pandemic where changes in the economy and the nature of work are influencing factors for investment, talent, and visitor, work will focus on actions that include consulting with stakeholders on potential outcomes of a refreshed brand, delivering new tools to ensure consistent brand messaging, and developing a marketing and communications plan. Next slide. The last priority is our key sector priority. The objective is to support small businesses and entrepreneurs and grow our knowledge base, tourism, creative industries, and small business. This priority has the most actions and requires the most collaboration with partners. Specific to the city's support of this priority, sample actions include relaunching our innovation pilot program, working with Invest Ottawa to develop an inventory of sites for investment attraction with a focus on the unique attributes of each area of the city, implementing the Nightlife Commissioner Office, and undertaking a small business needs analysis to determine what supports the city can provide to small business owners. Next slide, please. The Economic Development Services work plan for this year includes continuing the delivery with our existing programs and services and delivering the new actions listed on this slide, which include a talent plan, the downtown tactical team, and a new investment attraction site inventory, to name a few. This will all be done within existing resources and budget. Next slide, please. To report on strategy implementation progress, we will return to committee and council annually, outlining actions taken, outcomes achieved, and an overview of the work plan for the upcoming year. Performance indicators related to the strategy and the performance of the local economy will be reported on as part of the city's strategic planning process. Lastly, we will post an economic development strategy and action plan summary document on ottawa.ca following council approval. That concludes our presentation. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you very much. So I know that there is a direction and also a motion, so maybe we can introduce those now and then open it up for questions and discussion. Councillor Curry, and then I'll go to Councillor DeRuse after that for his motion. Councillor Curry?
Oh, you know what? I don't have the last iteration. There was one little change to it. So if somebody wants to wait for a second. I thought it would be on the screen, but. Okay, go to George first. That's
Councillor
actually
DeRuse, did you want to read your motion? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a small motion I'd like to present it to the committee. So, whereas Ottawa rural area encompasses a large geographical area within the city of Ottawa and is home to many businesses, including small businesses and agriculture operations. And whereas the 7th strategic priority do not directly mention the rural area within the city of Ottawa, and it would be beneficial to ensure that they are represented within these priorities. Therefore, be it resolved that strategy action number 7 be amended to read: key sectors support new and existing small businesses and entrepreneurs and grow Ottawa key economy sector with focuses on the knowledge-based sector, the tourism and creative industry sector, and the rural and agricultural sector.
Thank you, Councillor
Thank
DeRuse.
you, Mr. Mayor.
You didn't want to speak to it beyond that? You're good?
It's very straightforward, Mr. Mayor. I read the report and I listened to the presentation, and probably it's nothing really big, but I mean, if to mention and to making sure to include the rural sectors, because in rural area, we have a lot of small businesses and we have a major sector of agriculture and economy development. So I just want to kind of highlight to add it, and I think it's, I'm sure will be supported by my colleague, and I know I already discussed it with our staff, and I discussed it with our rural counselor too. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I know you also told me that you'll be supporting of it, so thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor DeRuse. Councillor Curry, do you have your direction? Okay, go ahead.
So this is a direction, and so there aren't a bunch of whereases, but I'll explain them shortly. But basically what I'm asking, and I've talked to staff, and staff, I understand, are receptive. Therefore, be it resolved that staff be directed to consult with the Canada North Business Association, the KNBA, and any other relevant stakeholders on the implementation of the economic development strategy. And be it further resolved that staff be directed to undertake similar consultations in support of the implementation of a specific and tangible action plan as it relates to the two special economic districts with an S, the Canada North Economic District and the Ottawa International Airport Economic District. So that's the direction.
Okay. What's that? Do you, go ahead if you want to speak to it, go ahead.
Sure, I want to speak to it, but I want to speak to the whole report. I first want to say that I read the report a couple of times with all the attachments, and I would say that this is the most important report we will receive this year. And the reason I say that, because people might be obviously bristling at the moment, but in my opinion, from economic development, everything else flows. So all the things that we care about, housing and all of our other priorities come from economic development, in my opinion. So hence, I think this is a truly important report, and I really thank staff for all the work. This is an enormous city, and in many, many different sectors, many different challenges, and you touched on everything. I will say, though, from the fact that we had these two special economic districts designated in the official plan recently, I didn't find there was enough referencing those. I think some of it is knowledge-based, some of the language that is doesn't really highlight the connection really between our two special economic districts, so that may be a challenge for it. But when I looked at each of the priorities, and I looked very carefully at them, priority 1, partnerships and collaboration, which I think really the special economic districts and the KNBA in particular are really truly important partners with 13 billion GDP. I don't just say that for the bingo card. I say it to remind everybody, like it's a significant contribution from the technology and innovation industry. City building projects, there, in that section, no mention of the tech park in the special economic district. And I won't go through them all, but really the only parts where there was mention was the connectivity, was the key sectors. But Invest Ottawa was mentioned in connectivity, talent, downtown in the Byward Market, and key sectors. And I think that won't be enough when the KNBA does such important work. So hence the reason why I think the KNBA needs to be seen differently from a member of OCOBIA. They are, obviously, but they're very different, I feel, from every other, they're very different from the Canada Central BIA. They all do important work, but the KNBA is very different. So anyway, that's why I want to make sure that when you go forward with some of your really important plans, that they really truly are consulted. I have other comments to make on Invest Ottawa, Mr. Mayor, that I think are separate. So I just want to make those comments now, because the connection between the Ottawa Airport Special Economic District and the Canada North Tech Park connects to then LRT Stage 3, to the autonomous vehicle shuttle, to getting the federal and provincial funding. Like, they're all connected. And I think that we have to make sure we're very clear on that. The other one thing I wanted to say was, no one in Canada would tell you that the downtown and Ottawa Central isn't important and that this needs to be our key focus. I mean, the concept of the federal government right now looking for people like employees all over Canada, not just in Ottawa, and we see what's happening with our federal buildings, what's happening to our payment in lieu of tax amount, that is serious, that's a serious issue for all of us. So in no way is Canada saying, we are so important out here in Canada, we don't care about that. We understand how much we are all connected. to that. I just think that the KNBA and the special economic districts need maybe a little more love. So, and I know you know that, it's just that this is such an important report, and it's read by people potentially all over the world. And I think that that could have been better highlighted. So I don't know if staff have a comment, but that's my overall comment.
Well, thank you for the comments, Mr. Mayor. And Councillor, we would agree with you definitely that Canada North BIA is very, very different from the other BIAs, particularly because of the type of business that they do. And we would be happy to work with the BIAs to see different ways that we could advance the economic district moving forward.
Thank you. Councillor Gower?
Thanks, Mayor. And thanks for the presentation. I wanted to ask staff if they could elaborate on some of the economic performance indicators, like some details on what those might look like and how council can expect to see reporting and updates over the next few years.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor. As you know, one of the city's 4 strategic priorities for this term of council is a diversified and prosperous economy, and there are a series of performance metrics that will be measured and attached to that work. Many of those metrics will be led by economic development services. As we begin to build work plans around these strategic priorities and the individual actions attached to those strategic priorities, part of the work plan will add a level of specificity around things that we can measure. So between the performance metrics attached to the city's strategic plan and the economic priority and the individual work plans that will be attached to each of the actions, there will be some concrete measures. Things like vacancy rate and permits, and there are some things that are, we'll call them low-hanging fruit and obvious. Bigger metrics and performance measures like GDP, to some degree, are out of the direct control of economic development. Our job is to really create, as a city, a set of conditions where economic development can happen, and through population growth and sort of foundational economic growth in our city related to population growth, hopefully we will start to see that investment and that increase in GDP. I hope that answers your question, Councillor.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I know we get our quarterly economic development reports as well. And I'm not sure if it's feasible, but I think it'd be useful to see where some of the actions that are outlined in this report, how those are linked to some of the outcomes. For example, the film office or the special economic districts or the diversity initiatives, the action items, where we are able to show links in assessment growth or in job growth or even in GDP, having more of a specific tie-in in those economic updates of where our actions are contributing to economic growth. I think that would be helpful to see and to track so that we can refine our focus and our investments as a city going forward. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gower. Councillor Leeper?
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to start, I would ask you to rule that Councillor Curry's direction actually be put as a motion. I think it's a bit, it's going to require some staff resources, and I'll still support it, but I think it should be a motion rather than direction. So for staff, I'm intrigued by the emphasis in this report on labor market assessment, the LMA stuff. Obviously, we're headquarters here in Ottawa to a number of the sector councillors who do this kind of work. I'm interested in the methodologies that you're proposing, and how would you use that information once we actually have the LMA?
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question. So during our consultations, a lot of what we hear are, there are labor shortages, there are sector shortages, but very sort of anecdotal feedback. So the purpose of this study would be to dig a little bit deeper, find out where are the true shortages. We hear trades, are they in specific skills for our high-tech industry? Are they in the C-suite? So figuring out what are those actual challenges, what are the trends in the labor market moving forward. We know we have an aging labor force, so what does that mean? What does that mean for Ottawa? So those types of trends, and then inform a plan forward. So what can we do to address those actual challenges, those actual opportunities? Because we're often competing for talent with Toronto and Montreal and other cities in Canada who do have quite robust talent attraction and retention programs. So it's really sort of that homework piece to figure out where is the proper way to move forward.
So what is your methodology for doing the LMA? Like, we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. There's geography-specific information available from the sector councils, I assume.
That's right. There's geography information, there's demographic information. We would have to speak to employers as well, post-secondary institutions, also another piece as well to gather that information. But really taking what we've heard anecdotally and putting it into a more structured plan, looking at the actual data that's out there and those trends. And we would likely have to engage some outside expertise for that.
Yeah, so if we do hire consultant to do some of this work, would we, my encouragement would be to ensure that we still make it open to the broader public to be able to read the stats that we gather, et cetera, because I think it'll be useful information. Let's give it freely to the schools, let's give it freely to the BIAs, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then the second part of that is the talent retention. I don't remember, 3-4 years ago, Michelle Tremblay and Invest Ottawa were talking about a robust talent attraction and retention strategy. What happened to that? Did the pandemic just nuke it, or?
So they do have a very small talent retention and attraction program, very focused on that high-tech sector. So they have 2 people working on that. They have a Work in Ottawa website. They do provide tools to employers, and they have a job site, but it's a small program and sector-specific. So this work is looking sort of citywide in that piece. But yes, they continue to have a small program.
Okay, that's intriguing and interesting. I wonder whether Invest Ottawa might just give us a quick update on how that's been performing since they began that. I'd be interested to see. I think that was it. The only other thing was with respect to the Ottawa Music Industry Coalition. Obviously, I'm thrilled to see that we continue to fund them and continue to fund them at a high level. I think they're doing great work with that, and I think we're getting a great return on investment from the funding that comes out of that. And that's probably the single most important outcome we had from developing the music strategy, I guess, in 2018, 2017, somewhere around there. So that's great. How do you anticipate the funding for the Music Industry Coalition may or may not change as a result of a new nightlife strategy? Obviously, music is an important part of nightlife, but it's not the only part of nightlife.
Thank you for the question, Mayor and Councillor. There is nothing contemplated moving forward that would in any way impact negatively the operational funding that we're providing to OMIC, the Ottawa Music Industry Coalition. We agree with you wholeheartedly that they are an incredibly solid organization that have really matured quite significantly under the leadership that they've enjoyed over the last few years, and we are very vested in them as sort of the voice of that live entertainment sector to continue collaborating with them. We see them as being an important asset and partner with the new Nightlife Commissioner Office, and we see it being very sort of a symbiotic relationship, but certainly we're not looking to in any way impact their funding. We know that OMIC continues to work to grow their funding, to access grant programs and other government funding opportunities, to, constantly evaluating their membership model and where they can sort of leverage additional funding to deliver more programmings to the sector that they represent. But they are very, very solid, and we're very, very buoyant on them.
Music to my ears. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Mayor. Good morning to you. Good report, certainly covers a lot of bases, but I want to focus on the federal government, our main employer. I'm very concerned, 4 years now since COVID started, and I'm very concerned about our city. I'm very concerned about what's happening downtown. I'm concerned if a new government comes in, knowing their philosophy about Ottawa and the need to spread public service, first of all, across Canada, but also to reduce the public service. We are not paying enough attention in the city of Ottawa with what's happening at the federal government, and your report is very light on the federal government. You're not really going into details. So I see the city manager here, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you meet with federal government officials, the Privy Council, to talk about 1 to 5 year strategy? What is the federal government thinking about expanding the public service, maintaining the public service, their presence in Ottawa? We know they're unloading buildings. This is going to have financial hardship on the city of Ottawa. So what's our senior management doing with respect to conversations with the federal government?
Thank you very much, Councillor, for that question. I do meet with the federal government on a fairly regular basis. I have a good conversation with the PSPC group, particularly around what's happening with their real estate here in the city. We know that they have put some of their buildings on a list of disposal. They've been very transparent with respect to that and talked to us about that process. We look for opportunities in terms of what can be done with those buildings to continue to attract employment to our city or other uses. They have held, I'm going to say, very close to their chest in terms of what their future plans are with respect to their workforce. So they have not shared that with us in terms of that longer plan, but we are discussing what's happening with those buildings and what that future might look like. And as I said, some opportunities that could be there either for us or for the private sector as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Anything we can get here at FinCorp from staff or even a presentation from the Privy Council or others, I think would be very helpful and useful to feeding into our knowledge and awareness and education. I went to the Board of Trade session last April about revitalizing downtown, and the federal government wasn't there. I said to the Board of Trade, how can you have a discussion about the future of Ottawa and going forward? And the main employer, huge real estate owner, not present as part of that conversation. If I'm a mayor of a small town, I'm meeting with my main employers all the time. I would be trying to understand to retain them, to keep jobs in town. We cannot ignore the federal government. When the federal government downsizes, we have a recession, and I'm very concerned about the next few years. The downtown economy is hurting. Public transit, because of federal government decisions, is hurting. It has not recovered, costing us tens of millions of dollars per year. And building transformation, I'm glad the city manager said attracting employers, because everyone thinks we can take office towers and automatically convert them to residential. That's not going to happen overnight. I want to see new employers attracted to the city of Ottawa. I want to see a strategy that says we've got buildings available, we've got an educated workforce. This is a great place to do business. Let's try and bring additional employers here as well. My next theme is about transportation. I appreciate you acknowledging the airport. I saw the mayor met with the CEO yesterday. CEO has been saying for 10 years, our competitive is being impacted. Our competitiveness as an airport, we're paying rent, the fees are too high, the fees on tickets is too high. I've been saying over and over again, what is the city's ability to contribute to pressuring and advocating for some relief here? You talked about high-speed train. Again, at some point, FinCorp should have a presentation. What's the overall vision? I know it's very infancy stages on the high-speed train, but how can Ottawa impact? What are the opportunities for the city of Ottawa with a new high-speed rail corridor, some new cities that are going to be served, not yet served by the train? And your report is silent on the fact that during COVID, national bus service went belly up. Greyhound went bankrupt. We have sort of these fragmented bus services now between large cities, but all those small towns that used to be served, that maybe students or others who have limited means to travel, don't have those opportunities. So if we want people to get to Ottawa, travel from Ottawa, we need to have the full complement of transportation. The retention of students is very important. So I led the summit for the mayor in my first term, sort of well versed in this. Federal government makes a policy decision about reducing students, we're silent. We don't take any position on the detrimental impacts of the city of Ottawa with fewer students, what students contribute to the immediate economy, the fact that many stay in Ottawa once they graduate, they contribute to our economic base, employment base, high-paying jobs, university educated statistically, we're silent. Why is the city of Ottawa not taking a position, the federal government, on this, that there are going to be detrimental impacts to our city if a certain percentage of our students are cut? We have to speak up on that.
Are you almost done, Councillor? 'Cause
Yes,
that's your,
I am.
your
I have
5 minutes. If
I
you
have
want.
concerns with sort of a branding strategy. I think we're not there yet. I think if there's limited resources in economic development, we have some much higher priorities. Some branding exercises in the past haven't been overly successful, and I think that we've got much higher priorities to focus on than some catchy name. I think focus on what Ottawa does well, make that better, and some of the areas within our city that people are concerned about, certainly focus on that. Your report does mention that. But I have other comments, Mayor, but my main point is the federal government is not receiving the same attention I'd like to see. I think we need to establish greater, whether it's working group, but talk about employment, talk about short-term, medium-term visions that they have, and I respect that the city manager said they hold their cards close to their chest, but so many people in this city depend on the federal government for employment and the economic benefits that this has for us that I think needs to be part of the overall strategy here. So thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Dudas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a question, but I wanted to start off by saying that I, as Councillor Curry said, found that this strategy and this action plan is probably one of the most significant pieces of legislation we're going to be approving and passing this year and probably in this term of council. And I think that, you know, after reading it at length and over again, I was very buoyed by the numbers that you had discovered. I was concerned that the pandemic I was concerned it had devastated our local economy, but it looks like we have bounced back from it significantly. We are doing incredibly well in terms of people being attracted to our city. It looks like obviously we have to retain them, we have to attract more, we have to attract more businesses. But I was so very pleased to see that in this report, in this strategy, we're signaling to all of our partners within the sector, as well as other municipalities, as well as around the world, that we are a collaborative and willing partner when it comes to economic development and prosperity. And I think the other thing too is that our city is very diverse. You know, we have a wonderful tech sector, in Canada. We absolutely have so many opportunities in the downtown core, and that is a work in progress. And we have, you know, the Orleans Corridor Secondary Plan, we have Barrhaven, we have our whole city has all these opportunities. So I was pleased to see the Downtown Action Plan, the Innovation Pilot Program being resurrected, the Nightlife Commissioner. There's a lot of excitement and some fun attached to that, which Ottawa isn't always known for. You know, we're not always known for fun. We are fun though, so I you know, challenge the naysayers. But I also love to see that the BIAs will continue to be supported because those are our local communities. So I do see a lot of positivity in this. I have to say, you know, once again, we have been talking about a lot of our economic opportunities, well, for as long as Ottawa has been a city, and even pre-amalgamation. So I am looking forward to those annual reports. I do want to see those key performance measurements. I want to know that we're on the right track because we know that things can change. The pandemic hit. We couldn't expect that or anticipate. We had to pivot. We had to take serious actions in respect to that. So I am very, very positively encouraged by this strategy, by the action plan. I'm encouraged by the fact that our partners are at the table. I do think that there is benefit in supporting Councillor Curry's motion and keeping a bit of an eye on the ball, so to speak. And I am very excited about our future. You know, the 200th anniversary of the Byward Market and Bytown, you know, maybe we have 2017 all over again and all the optimism and excitement that comes with that. And I think our residents are ready for it, right? And the more we promote the positivity of our city, the more businesses are attracted, the more people want to stay, the more people see that we have such a high quality of life. So I'm seeing this as a huge positive. Always we can continue to press forward. We can continue to attract and retain and work more, but this is a good news story. Now on to my question, and I'll be very quick, Mr. Mayor. We are not alone, so we share the Ottawa River, the Rivière Outaouais, with Gatineau. And in the report, it does speak to the fact that we are the National Capital Region. We know that with numbers of population comes the ability for more attraction. So I'm curious as to how we are working not only within the borders of Ottawa, but how are we encompassing the opportunities that Gatineau can bring to us in terms of economic prosperity?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for that question regarding Gatineau. It was very, very important, and one of our key principles, priorities in the development of this strategy to really acknowledge a one-region approach to both marketing and growing economic development and growing the economy on both sides of the river. The Downtown Action Plan, which Shayla mentioned in her presentation, is a piece of work that the Board of Trade is leading with is leading with the Canadian Urban Institute, with the City of Ottawa's support and other partners, and it also considers the downtown report that the City of Gatineau has just released a couple of weeks ago. They've released a plan for their downtown, and so there are some opportunities that we can now see to put together a bit of a framework to actually do something. We talk a lot. Sometimes it's hard to take that intent and convert it to action. But what we're trying to do with this strategy is take some of those conversations that have been ongoing over many years and actually convert to actions. One of the other things that is underway that, again, initiated by the Board of Trade and as an output to that, something Councillor Brockington mentioned, the session that was held last April, we're referring to it as a Good Neighbor Summit. And there have now been 3 Good Neighbor Summit. And at the table is the City of Ottawa, the City of Gatineau, some private sector partners, PSPC, Treasury Board, and it's a little bit of an informal table, Chatham House rules, where these organizations can come together and speak candidly about their strategies and their plans moving forward to see if we can identify areas of intersection. So we're at the very, very early stages of that work, but we just received a presentation recently from Gatineau on their downtown plan. Shayla and I commented to ourselves while we were listening to the presentation that there were a lot of similarities in what they're looking at and what we're looking at, and clearly we can advance all of our mutual interests if we move forward together.
Oh, that's
that answers your
excellent.
question.
That's excellent news. You know, we have the significant advantage of being the national capital, and every time we can leverage that, we must. So I'm pleased to hear that, and I thank you for all the work you've put into this strategy and the action plan.
Thank you, Councillor Dudas. I'm going to go first to the members of the committee and then the other councillors. So Vice Chair Kitts.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick comment. So we have Byward Markets District, Canada North Special Economic District, Ottawa Airport Special Economic District, Central, West, and South. So geographically, you know where I'm going with this. There's a gap there. So I wanted to take this opportunity to say that there actually is a lot going on in Orleans, and I know that you know that. Councillor Dudas, Luloff, the mayor, and I were just at the Orleans BIA expansion week before last. LRT has started testing in Orleans. We passed the Orleans Corridor Study Secondary Plan, was that last year? And while working from home has not been good for the downtown, and we need to address that, it has boosted businesses in the suburbs, evidenced by many new small businesses opening and thriving. So I know this is a conversation that we've been having with your team, and the mayor and I have been talking about this as well. But the central theme, I think, in conversations that I've been having with business owners in Orleans is now is the time to invest in Orleans. There's a lot happening in the East End, and since we know historically the East has struggled to attract and retain businesses, I just couldn't pass up the opportunity to make a plug for it. So I think There's a lot of good in this report. I want to thank staff for all your work in it. I won't repeat the comments that were already said, but just wanted to weigh in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Kitts. Councillor Luloff.
Thanks so much, Mr. Mayor. I just want to voice my support for Councillor Curry. That the tech park is a key economic driver for the city and attracts investment and innovation from all over the world. And I also support comments made by Councillor Derues. A continued investment and support to our rural businesses is going to lead to their growth, contribute to the vibrancy of rural villages, leading to job growth and the reduction of commuting wear on infrastructure and emissions. And Councillor Leeper is correct to point out the incredible work of OMIC as they are growing into a mature organization. And the only reason why I'm not a member, because there's a lot of benefits to being a member. So if you're a musician or a composer out there, I think you should join. The only reason why I'm not a member is that it would create a conflict of interest on my support for them. So I can't say enough about the great work that they do. I'm glad to see the recognition of the work that the film office does and look forward to getting the soundstage project moving again. That office punches so far above its weight with significantly less funding and support than other organizations that we support, while attracting investment from Cumberland Village to CARP, Kitchissippi to Osgood. I will say briefly that I think that our continued dependence on the federal government for employment is one of the things that's holding us back as a city. It also removes our agency and responsibility for our own destiny. I'm glad to see the focus on other areas of our economy and encourage us to operate as if we were any other major city and continue to foster growth in our tech, hospitality, culture, entertainment, film, manufacturing, and knowledge-based sectors. Ottawa can stand on its own as a vibrant capital without depending on others, and especially partners that are subject to such large changes in levels of commitment over time. We have immense talent here in our city, and we are attracting even more talent here. I believe that we should focus on that, and I believe that that is exactly what this team is trying to do with this plan, so thank you for that. Can staff speak a little bit more to secondary plan areas and how this plan will support economic corridors, like the one identified in Orleans from Youville to Trim? Because Councillor Kitts is correct. You know, we did this large economic corridor study and talked about economic growth in Orleans. And I don't want that study just to be kind of floating off in the ether away from this report. Thanks.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thanks very much. And this is one of the things where I think we have to always, again, look back at the interrelated nature of economic development. It affects many sectors as we move our way through. Certainly, Councillor Kitts and Councillor Dudas, you brought up the LRT that is now moving into testing now, and what an economic generator that in itself is going to be as it moves its way through, and the stimulation. As we all know, we passed the Orleans Secondary Plan last year. That is moving its way through, but that is also one of those foundational documents in terms of the planning side of things that provides some of that foundational support. This team as well is also moving forward with the community improvement plan bylaws, which will be coming back to this council later this month, I believe, as we move our way through. So that is one of the just an example of how these pieces all fit together as you move the way through, between transportation, between economic development opportunities to support small business, between laying out the land use and policy permissions to allow for entrepreneurial activities and for businesses to grow. That is almost a really good kind of a synthesis of how this process all works. As we move our way forward with these other secondary plans, as we work our way forward, it is within our structure to be looking at these different layers and these different aspects of the secondary plans and how you reinforce and bring together all of these things as you can. So when you look at all of these different priorities that we have in there, they all layer on top. They all have the opportunity to be to drive down to that local level, to be stimulating those economic opportunities that are there, but they are also reinforced by that interplay of all the other strategic plans that we have between infrastructure, between transportation, between land use, between all of those pieces there. And they all really it's a collaborative effort as we move our way through those implementation of those secondary plan pieces.
Thank you. I do really appreciate that. And perhaps then I'll work with the clerk offline to include the Orleans Economic Corridor specifically in the document in the areas that were being referenced by Councillor Kitts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Luloff. Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and great to see the report. Thanks for your work in putting together. There's lots of good information in there and some exciting action items, I think, that are going to help propel the city forward. So thank you for doing that. One of the items in there is a new competition-sized aquatics and athletics facilities. I'm just wondering if you can expand on that a little bit, what your vision is there on the athletics and aquatics facilities.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillor. We know through our work with Ottawa Tourism and the Major Events Office that there are some barriers to attracting sizable competitions, sporting events to Terry Fox Athletic Facility, by way of example, and aquatics and diving type competitions. So we have done some work with them to establish what some basic requirements would be in order to get to a level. And we're not talking Pan Am Games or Olympics or anything that large, but just more national and maybe some smaller international type competitions. So we have long been advocating where we can with the former administration and ongoing to make sure that any investment that the city might be looking to make in its recreational facilities considers the opportunity and the economic impact that can be realized by having competition-sized facilities that can also be used, obviously, for community use, but could satisfy the major sport hosting opportunities as well.
That's great to hear. I know that we sometimes lose out on some of those competitions because we don't have the pools, for example, that we need in those facilities. And so just really appreciate the work that I know RCFS has been putting in and your team's been putting in. So thanks for that. I do want to comment just that the report also speaks a lot about the significant implications of climate change for Ottawa's economic future, and talks about a 2021 Swiss Institute report that estimates that if climate change is not addressed, it could result in a 10% loss of GDP in North America by 2050 from property loss and damage, disruption to services, and lost productivity. I think we're probably one of the poster cities of all the experiences that we've had here over the last few years of a changing climate and the importance of a resiliency strategy, of adapting and then making sure that we're aligning our goals with what we say we want to do with our actions. So just really appreciated the report touching on that and the great potential threat to our infrastructure if this is not addressed. So thank you for putting that in the report as well. I'll also just comment too, because I'm hearing a lot from, we hear East End rural, West End core, all segments of Ottawa, but we're unique in some ways because we were amalgamated years ago. And so we have these former kind of town centers that used to exist in all of these other, in all of our towns. So we're the perfect city to develop 15-minute communities in those areas. But we have to do that in a way that doesn't keep allowing more and more sprawl because it's exceptionally costly to keep sprawling out. We're never going to get to those 15-minute communities if we keep moving out. And so as an economic development strategy, because of the cost to our infrastructure, which we're seeing now, we do need to focus on those former town centers, developing those. And of course, strong cities have strong downtowns, strong cores. We need to make sure that we match our ambition with investing in strong cores, a strong downtown that brings more business right across the city. And I think we have such a great example because we have 11 former municipalities where we've got those strong potential for 15-minute communities. So we've all come to the realization, I think, that government budgets cannot really fund adequate levels of service for sprawling municipal infrastructure. So the investment in our 15-minute communities, which the official plan, I think, does a great job of speaking about, we need to really, I think, focus on how we do that in a way that promotes those former town centers and creates those 15-minute communities without pushing out and costing us more and more and more in this city. So just wanted to mention that. I think we're stronger together. We all do well when we all do well. So thanks, Mayor, for the time, and appreciate staff putting the report together.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Councillor King.
Thank you so much, Your Worship, and I'd like to also thank staff for providing such a multifaceted strategy concerning economic development in our city. I have to echo the comments of other councillors who have noted that economic development is at the core of everything. It's a major driver, and I think what you've provided before us is focused on downtown. It's focused on our special economic districts, and it's also focused, I think, and Councillor Menard was speaking to this, on 15-minute neighborhoods with investments in our BIAs, our business improvement areas. We know that they're very important, 19 of them, urban, suburban, rural, focused on over 6,400 businesses. So it's important that we continue to have a focus on our BIAs, because I think that our traditional main streets are really some of the lifeblood of our economy in our city, especially around ensuring that we have sustainable small businesses. So I really want to thank staff for the multifaceted approach to economic development in terms of what's reflected in this report. I did have a question around the relaunch of the innovation pilot program. So I just was curious as to whether you can outline what would that look like. We know that the program experienced some changes due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but I'm just curious, as we emerge from that emergency, what would a relaunched innovation pilot program look like?
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question. So you're correct, Councillor. We did a special pandemic part of the program focusing on pandemic solutions, and then we took a pause. So the new program would be similar to the previous program, but we intend to do more outreach, so working more with students, student entrepreneurs, newcomer entrepreneurs, and also focusing not just on giving the opportunity to test a product or service with the city, but also working with some of our partners. So we did that during the pandemic. We had one organization, for example, that did an app around volunteers, getting volunteers, and we found that that particular app was better suited to one of our partners. So it's really about expanding our network and expanding our outreach and promoting the program more actively, and then really providing the entrepreneurs or the startups with that real feedback that they need to improve their product or service before they go to market.
Thank you so much. I'm happy that that's going to be the continued direction of the pilot project. The project that you referenced was actually in my ward. It was driven by the Manor Park Community Council, and it was an amazing scenario where we were utilizing software developed by a local small developer to ensure that volunteers were properly allocated to address food insecurity throughout neighborhoods in Ward 13 as well as Ward 12. So I thought that this was an amazing example of really looking at entrepreneurs who are starting very innovative companies. They're starting off small, but they're utilizing their technologies to really advance large ideas and ensure that there are large results that occur in terms of impacts, positive impacts for residents. I'm happy that that's the direction that you're going to take, because I think that that was very successful. The idea of ensuring that smaller organizations and companies within the technology ecosystem have an opportunity to really showcase their products, along with what we're also doing in the plan, ensuring that we grow the potential to see future unicorns in terms of technological companies bear fruit in the city. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for continuing the pilot. And thank you so much for the opportunity to ask the question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Hill?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess on behalf of my Barrhaven residents, I just want to say thank you very much. I think this is a great report. Certainly economic development is something that I put number one on my list of priorities as a city councillor, because if we don't have prosperity in our business community, then we can't have good paying jobs, and it all trickles down from there. I do really appreciate this conversation, because I don't think there's anything that's been said that I don't agree with. I'm very appreciative of the two motions that we just heard this morning, the one to include a highlight of our rural and agricultural communities, but also to highlight the importance of our two economic zones and that of the Canada North Business Park, which is a huge economic engine for the city. In terms of moving towards the official plan, moving towards 15-minute communities, as a suburban community that is, has principally grown out of residential and is one of those textbook examples of folks that, work for the federal government, go downtown kind of thing. How are we looking at integrating the new zoning bylaw in order to enable that 15-minute community so that we have good paying jobs out in the suburbs so that people can live, work, and play in that 15-minute community concept that we want to move towards?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. I think it's very important that we always understand, as much as it's important that a downtown core is certainly a thriving part and a key component as we move our way forward, as has been said around the table, that strong neighborhoods also require strong main streets as well to flourish. So certainly the economic lens is one that has been put into place. It was put in place in part of the official plan as we move our way forward in terms of what is our strategy for corridors as they work our way through. As we look at the main streets and we look at the permissions that we are going to be looking through with the new zoning bylaw, it will also be with that lens to look at what is the most widest range of opportunities that we can allow to occur within that. What are the outcomes that we are trying to achieve in those main streets? And then how can we ensure that we are not limiting the flexibility for someone to come up with new ideas and with new innovations. So that'll be the big challenge with that as we go through, to walk that fine balance between ensuring that we have the regulation that we need in the zoning bylaw to control for the unintended outcomes, while at the same time providing as much permission as we can for all of those ideas that we have no idea about yet, but I'm sure are fermenting in the minds of people right now in those neighborhoods.
Thank you. I would just offer, when I look at what I think is the biggest threat and the biggest opportunity to the economic development for our city, I look squarely at our affordability going forward. We could have a competitive edge against Toronto and against other major cities if we are able to be affordable for the workforce to come and live here. It's not going to work if we have folks that are, commuting 90 minutes one way in order to get to work, because A, they're going to quit, B, they're going to find other places to go, or they're going to settle for other jobs in other locations. So I do think that a very aggressive strategy to try to retain some semblance of affordability in our housing market, what we can do to try and make middle-class jobs actually stretch so that people can enjoy a middle-class lifestyle is critically important over the next decade, so that we can attract folks to come out and we can attract companies to come out. I've spoken with a number of companies who have told me, the biggest concern we have is our ability to bring in a workforce and they can't afford to live. And if we continue to become more unaffordable as a city, we are going to squander that edge, which we right now have, especially when we look at comparisons to the Greater Toronto Area. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the report. It just reflects on, why some of us who didn't grow up in Ottawa moved here in the first place, and the excitement of Ottawa and the future. I'm still very optimistic. In terms of transportation, I'm glad to see that high-speed trains were mentioned, and it says you're ongoing. I just want to know what's being done on that, because I think that's equally as important as airports. It stops those short-term flights, and that helps with climate change, to Toronto and the places, to Montreal. So how's that going?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have been and continue to be in discussions with Infrastructure Canada and partners who are moving forward with the high-frequency rail program. That program is currently under a request for proposals, and Ottawa certainly is involved. We are a stakeholder, of course, along with many other municipalities, but we have met with that project team before, also with the mayor as well. to go over what Ottawa's interest would be with that. So that is something that we continue to track.
I
No,
appreciate.
no pun intended.
Okay, especially since like Greyhound shut down and there's very little opportunities for those trips that could have been done by train. And hopefully we'll see that in the future. I think it has to be emphasized. In terms of the talent pool and attracting a talent pool, I appreciate that. And I see newcomers coming in all the time. Just a reminder that we have talent here and that I look at Ottawa Community Housing. There's so many young people that grow up there, and I see a ton of talent. I see a lot of optimism for the future, and I hope that we tap into that and continue to have programs for them. I know we have some, but as a city, but we need to encourage that and have opportunities for those that are growing up here. As you've already said, you know, we have the opportunity to have a bilingual workforce because most students get both languages, et cetera. So I hope that we're taking that in consideration of people who are growing up here and have a lot to offer, especially to help with the diversity of our workforce. So I just wanted to mention that. Housing, I think a lot of people, when they look at moving to Ottawa, they look at the price of houses. It's crazy everywhere. But the more we do on affordable housing has to be part of our plan. It's got to be, it's got to take the pressure off of, you know, coming here, because people don't come here and buy mansions. They start out smaller, and we need more affordability. And that's something that we're working on, and we've made that a commitment. But it's got to show up. I mean, I look at cities in Europe that have done this, and this is something that makes us more stable and have a more to offer across the way. So I just want to know if that can be considered in terms of the economic development. We've already talked about the aquatics, one of my favorite subjects. And I know that there's a secondary plan going on for Queensview Pinecrest and also for Lincoln Fields. There's opportunities. Have you considered the site for a possible pool? Because looking at the old bus depot on Queensview, eventually we will not need it. So I had conversations with both this years ago. This is an opportunity. It's right beside a station. So I just want to know if you've looked at that, because we do need central locations with good transit.
Mr. Mayor, I'll just touch really briefly on the housing file. Certainly the economic lens is pervasive, and certainly there is a deep integration with that land use piece. Housing file does certainly have that economic lens within it. The official plan had that economic lens through it, and it's part of that structure is working its way. The quantity of homes, quality of homes, and then the support for quality support neighborhoods as they move their way forward. Certainly the zoning bylaw as well has the same thing with respect to efficient regulations, effective regulations, and equitable regulations, which also includes that affordability component as you're working your way through. So I would say that in terms of that relationship of housing and neighborhood support for creating livable environments that then in turn allow for that economic linkages towards Canada North Business Park, towards our main streets, towards other places that they go. I feel that those are covered in terms of the relationship between multiple plans as they work together. I hope that answers your question.
I'll continue to ask it forever, but those are things that we have to keep in mind, and of course Ottawa Community Housing plays a big role in that. So appreciate it. The nightlife, not a nightlife person, but one thing I think about when I think of building a nightlife, I look at Montreal, who's got a bike ride at night and things like that. So, you know, get out of the box, and it's not about necessarily always concerts and stuff, but doing activities that get people out. This is one of the healthiest, we have the opportunity to be one of the healthiest cities around, and another reason to attract people. So I hope that we'll consider other options, not just concerts. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Desroches.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I heard the exchange with Councillor Luloff, and I think I share his perspective that I guess I don't see or a strong focus on the buildup of the employment areas that we're working so hard to build in the outside Greenbelt areas. And I'm wondering if you just speak to how the strategy is going to animate, promote, and attract business and companies, if you will, to the employment lands that we're setting aside so that we can have these balanced communities and start to look like a Canada where they have, strong employment and strong residential and probably could sustain itself quite independently of the city of Ottawa. So I think we're working to build these communities within communities. Where is that economic development for the suburban communities?
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor. So one of the pieces of work that we did as part of the economic analysis portion of the strategy was we took a look at different areas of the city. So we didn't go by ward, but we went by central, south, east, west, and rural. And we examined all the attributes of those areas, so the demographics, the key infrastructure, and the zoning. And so we do have a sort of a profile of these areas and what are the competitive strengths. And so what we intend to do is to work with Invest Ottawa, who is our investment attraction arm and our business expansion arm, to work with them to match particular sites in different areas and be promoting those sites and having a proactive list of sites around the city so that when we attract new jobs or businesses here expand, we're able to help them get to the right and most appropriate place in the city.
Great, thank you. And I think it was good that you did a SWOT analysis, but the SWOT analysis to me comes across as very mopey. We're not doing well in the downtown core, therefore the entire city is not doing well. And I think there is some advantage to the telework and the uptick that we are seeing in communities in terms of retail development. People are using the retail on greater levels within their own community. And so why isn't that telework a competitive advantage for certain communities in terms of economic development?
Mr. Mayor, we would definitely agree that the telework and the remote work have been advantages for certain areas of the city. I think around the downtown piece, it's about recognizing that we're going to have to rebalance the downtown, that the jobs are not coming back necessarily full-time 5 days a week. And so maintaining those jobs in the suburb and how they're helping the economy, but looking at our downtown and what are some other things that we can do downtown and to rebalance that activity, like tourism, like placemaking.
Sure. And so it leads me to my next question. Why aren't we talking about the Ottawa Senators and that tremendously important project, I think, both for the brand of the city and the great potential that I think it has for economic development in the downtown core and the historical slow pace of the NCC to really make timely decisions when it comes to the LeBreton Flats, which has contributed, I think, in a negative way to the growth of our city. So why don't we refer specifically to the Ottawa Senators in this strategy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor. I think the economic opportunity that a downtown arena would afford the downtown and the city of Ottawa broadly is sort of well understood, and certainly it's very, very much on the radar of economic development services here at the city and many of our economic development partners, frankly. At this point, it's very much a negotiation between the Ottawa Senators and the NCC, and I would suggest that it's at more of I'm going to say a political level at this juncture and hasn't really trickled down to City of Ottawa staff per se. But when a downtown arena is more than an idea and becomes an actual file, Economic Development Services will view that opportunity as a high economic impact project under our HYPE program and provide the Senators Group with all of the service that we provide through that program with a dedicated economic development officer and a dedicated planner working to shepherd that file through the city's approvals process.
Okay, thank you. I certainly, support our strategy to attract the best and the brightest, to go after the top talent. But not everybody's going to work for a Shopify. Not everybody's going to be in engineering or science. We are going to need light industrial use. We're going to have companies that are skilled, the employees are skilled, but it's more light industrial. So they might be, manufacturing components of different things in our society. So where is that less glamorous marketing and attraction of those types of jobs that, as we hear a lot lately, creating powerful paychecks for people, right? That again aren't going to work, in a hospital as a physician, or aren't going to be an engineer, but they're going to work in a skilled trade that provides viable and long-term employment. And many of the suburban areas have those, in inner Greenbelt areas have those business parks that provide those kind of much more grittier jobs. Are we promoting those as well? We can't just promote the Shopifys of the world.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think when we talk about, some of the, I can call them less high profile, but incredibly important jobs that we have out there, the fundamental jobs, millwrights, construction trades, all the people who really are the ones who keep the whole city humming and running as we go along. That is going to be part of that talent strategy that we are looking forward to collaborating with our partners on. And certainly when we talk about collaborating with Algonquin School, the Algonquin College, the universities, the post-secondary institutions, but also with our industry partners, GOBA, things like that, in terms of identifying and understanding what it is their needs and coming up with that strategy. That is really what initiative number 4 is really all about. Having a mapping and an understanding of all of the various needs that are there across the sectors, not simply the ones that, as you mentioned, the knowledge sector needs, but also the really core foundational needs as well that are needed to move the way through. That is an opportunity that the municipality can take to really look at and be able to map out all of those various pieces, and then work with our partners to be able to understand how we can best support the leveraging of those trade opportunities as we go forward. Sheila, did you want to add anything?
Sure. The only thing that I would add, and something that we've seen more recently, is also, taking advantage of Ottawa's location, so our strategic location between Toronto, Montreal, and that large consumer base, and, attracting or looking at some of that light industrial and those fulfillment type businesses that are attracted to Ottawa, and especially to the 400 series highways and located near those highways. So those are some other industries that we are considering as well.
Yeah, sure. And I'm glad to hear it. And I think they are an important segment of our economy that tend not to get the best profile at times, and they deserve better. And I think you're right. That is, we see the tax increases, municipal tax increases that are taking place in Toronto. I hope that there will be some businesses that consider making a long-term investment in the city of Ottawa. Just want to talk about our planning process. When I talk to sort of some members of the business community, they complain about dealing with us and getting through an application in a timely fashion. And what are we doing to make sure that our planning applications, not just for housing, but for the employment pieces, are moving through in a timely fashion?
Maybe I'll talk about it just in 2 pieces there. One of them would be the planning applications to development review, and this is mainly, I guess, with the Planning and Housing Committee is where most of the action has been through, but certainly, the touching in on that has been there. So the development review process team has been working their way through the Bill 109 changes to restructure and streamline their process. We will be coming forward with an annual development report later on to Planning and Housing Committee that will detail some of the key metrics that we're looking to track the success rate and the turnover rate as they move their way through. We also understand as well there's also a continuous process improvement for some of the business licensing, business permits, and things like that. Certainly, that's not something that I can talk about. We'd have to bring forward the general manager for one of those to maybe proffer some of those commentaries. But in terms of that continuous improvement process for business licensing, for permits, for facilitating small businesses, they work their way through. There are programs currently in place to continually be looking at those programs and look for ways in which they can be improved.
And just lastly, it's exciting that we have the LRT extension to, into the south of the city. Areas like Bayview, I think, are getting a lot of attention in terms of the transit-oriented development. But we've also got stations like Leitrim. I call it the ugly duckling station. Like this is an old industrial line. So there's parts where we have limitations in terms of former landfill capacity, really scratch development that took place over the years. Where's our, no services? That's the other thing in terms of water and sewer. Where's our focus on trying to animate some of these less than attractive and not first choice transit stations that we're investing very heavily in, like Leitrim?
So I think in terms of that, Mr. Mayor, this is one of those opportunities, again, where the economic development strategy provides that foundation. It provides a series of strategies that could then be linked to other initiatives across the city. It linked to initiatives as they move forward from the implementation of the official plan as we look through various opportunities. Also connections to the infrastructure master plan in terms of servicing capacity and extending main trunks out to open up servicing capacity to new areas. So in terms of the strategic priorities and actions that are here, they really are the foundational structure as they move their way through. There'll be a series of work items that will flow from this, but those work items will in turn also link together with other department priorities as we move our way forward, particularly as we connect to the project lists that are associated with the infrastructure master plan, with the transportation master plan, and also the unfolding regulatory framework that we unfold to create some of those opportunities.
Okay, thank you. I know I'm out of time, and I thank you. I won't need to go back on the list, so I appreciate the extra few seconds there. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Desroches. Councillor Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to share a couple things, and then I am going to make a few comments about Invest Ottawa. So you had Minister Champlain come to your mayor's breakfast. That was super fun. And he came over to me to be introduced, and I said, I'm the councillor for Canada North, and he said to me, you're sitting on a gold mine. And I said, yeah, I know. And, my thought immediately was, that's great. He recognizes that. I think he, as a minister, has the finger on the pulse of the nation for technology and innovation for sure. But I also thought, but it has to be mined, that gold. And to everyone who's wondering, is there an industry or a component of how we make up for federal challenges, like the jobs that we may not have anymore? And one of them is the compound semiconductor industry. And that's the one, I think, to watch. And I know that staff are. I hope you really follow it carefully. It's an amazing project from the NRC that will spin out and be working with the companies in the tech park and in the city. All the fabrication companies are right there. So Ottawa is poised certainly to be a big player in the compound semiconductor industry, very different from just the silicon compound, silicon semiconductors. So that is number one thing I wanted to say. The other thing I want to say is that, when you're looking at an innovation district, you have to remember, and I don't want to be rah Canada North, but we have a living lab there already, right? Where, LSpark spins out a new company and they're able to test it right in a living lab, so that is something you have to understand better if you don't already, how that works and everyone. The other is for the job portal. The Canada North Business Association, KNBA, has Discover TechNata, right? And they hold the massive job fair. So that, and I'll get to Invest Ottawa, has to be much more coordinated because it's already working quite well. Constantly lists how many jobs are available in the tech park. At times there have been 1,800 jobs available, specifically showing you in what industries. People just apply right online to those jobs. The other thing I wanted to say was, in terms of the innovation pilot program, I'm really glad to hear that that's coming back. That's great. I'm hoping that can work with the mayor's table and the strategic projects office. I think that there's a lot of synergy potential there. I did want to say that, just a general thank you to the whole Nokia project was very much because of staff and the hard work to shepherd that through. So, everyone here needs to be aware of how much hard work went into that. Krishan, Steve Pryor, Charmaine, all of you, that was significant, and it was a lot of work, and it will drive economic development for sure, if you look at how big that project is. So I just want to say thank you to that. And I also wanted to say that, in terms of a plan for the Special Economic District, Stantec already has one, came out just before the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit. So that needs to be looked at, again, very carefully, because it's an excellent plan. And the one question I have before I get to Invest Ottawa is, my understanding is that Calgary is, their work on economic development is stellar. And I'm wondering how closely we work with the, departments in the City of Calgary, and obviously the Mayor of Calgary.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. As part of the process of developing this economic development strategy, of course, we did quite a good review of economic development plans across the country, both ourselves and through our consultant, and we can pick up the phone and call anybody, anywhere, in any economic development department, and there is often good discussion and collaboration back and forth. Certainly, Calgary has been experiencing issues since well before the pandemic, and they are perhaps a little further ahead in some of the problem solving that they're doing, specifically in Calgary, in terms of the monies that they're putting into housing and into their downtown. But there are many, many lessons that other municipalities across the country can learn. The relationship that we are enjoying with the Canadian Urban Institute puts us very, very much at a table where that conversation is happening with the big 6 cities across the country and all of the issues that they're dealing with. So the short answer is yes, we're connected, and yes, we have the opportunity to avail ourselves of best practices and learnings from places like Calgary.
Wonderful to hear, great. So I am going to talk about Invest Ottawa because I have a number of comments, but I do want to highlight what Councillor King, I think a number of councillors talked about, Councillor Luloff, Leeper. The Ottawa Film Office, it's unbelievable for their $400,000 that they come up with $42 million for 2023. 2023, 1 year, $42 million for their little $400,000 we give them. That is a great return on investment, and the soundstage will be a key component of it. I just think, though, when we are deciding who gets money the next time round, those types of outcomes are really important. And so, as I turn to Invest Ottawa, I don't see that outcome. I don't see that outcome also being measured. Maybe it is, and it's not in this report. But, in the report, the data for the $1.3 billion that Invest Ottawa potentially generated had to go back to 2012 for their $5 million a year or $4.6 million a year. And I question that, whether or not, this report's asking us to just continue to fund that. And I'm wondering what the plan is for some serious outcomes to be measured in terms of KPIs. They're looking at a new executive director, and whoever gets that job has to understand, I think, that they need to produce some outcomes. For the $5 million, that's a lot of money. The city could keep that money and create a different economic development role here for a lot less than $5 million and could be working with, the KMBA potentially. I always question that, and I don't mean to be hard on them, because I think Invest Ottawa does a very good job at young entrepreneurs in every sector, helping people start businesses, business plans. I think they do that very well. My general impression is they can't do everything, and they're not doing everything well. They're spread too thin. And that's why I'm hoping to hear that it will be more strategic.
Mr. Mayor, so I'll do my best to answer the different facets of your question. So Invest Ottawa does have a new strategic plan. It is posted on their website. And to your point of probably doing many, many things, they've narrowed down their objectives. We could certainly share a deck on that, but narrowed down their objectives to see where they are most effective in which industries, so that they are, not spread too thin. In terms of their performance metrics, that sample is a very, very small sample. They measure a number of metrics on all 3 areas of their business. So they've got their venture development side, which is their entrepreneurship side, which you just spoke to, where they measure, the number of companies that they help, the number of capital they bring in. There's a series of measures there. They have talent measures, and then they also have measures on their global expansion team. So that's the team that brings in investment and then helps expand investment. So So number of jobs facilitated, number of investments brought in, they do publish that on their website quarterly, and we do get that information. So there is a reporting framework, and I mean, there's always room to improve it, and perhaps the new CEO will add to that, but there are metrics that they report to us on quarterly and that are posted online.
All right, thank you very much. My time's up.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Councillor Brockington?
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to agree, Councillor Curry, what you said. I'm not going down that road now, but when I see the City of Ottawa contribute to a variety of organizations, whether it's with a economic development lens or not, I always ask, what are we expecting our money to accomplish? And are we on a continuous basis making sure that our contribution is being used for the purposes provided? Just going back to the downtown, when I meet with various community leaders, we talk about the federal government's unloading of buildings, and we eventually talk about the growth of downtown and, again, the recovery we'd like to see downtown. One question that comes up is, who's in charge? Who's overall in charge? Right? Because we've got the federal government involved, obviously the City of Ottawa, the NCC, Board of Trade. At the end of the day, who has taken the reins? Who should be taking the reins? Who's the main cheerleader, promoter, advocate, pro-Ottawa person to see, downtown thrive? So what's your interpretation of that question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Brockington, for that question. It's one that we're all wrestling with, but I think we're making some good steps forward and some progress. So the Downtown Action Plan that I described, that's initiated by the Board of Trade, being led by the Canadian Urban Institute, supported by the City of Ottawa and a number of other partners, is really taking all the work that's been done up to this point, all the different plans, all the different conversations and discussions, and putting it together into a tactical plan that assigns responsibility. Some things live with the feds, some may live with the province, many reside with the city, some live with the private sector. And the idea with this plan is that we own our parts, and the last piece of this plan is the development of some form of a stewardship model going forward. So we all receive our action items and we go back to our respective corners. Where is the accountability piece, and how are we going to continue to keep each other accountable to their particular part? So in this economic development strategy and action plan, one of our specific actions around downtown is the establishment of a downtown tactical team. So that is in response to what we anticipate is coming with the Downtown Action Plan. And what that will do is we'll pull together all of the parts across the city that touch downtown around one table, where we can take the Downtown Action Plan to this table. We can discuss how we're moving forward on different pieces related to downtown. And I, as that representative, can take that back to the Downtown Action Plan stewardship group and say the city said we would do this and we did it. We said we'd do this and we did it. I then can receive that information from the Board of Trade, the private sector, the feds, and everybody else who has a piece and is engaged. And then I can bring that back to leadership, political and staff here at the city. So there's a good communication in both directions. That's the plan.
Great, I appreciate that answer. And so what's the frequency of this committee getting updates? I would like to see something a little more frequent than annually, but what are your intentions?
I would say those decisions have yet to be decided, subject to council's approval of this plan and the actual establishment of a downtown tactical team. Economic Development Services will put that framework together. We've already started, but we'll take it first to our departmental leadership. The city manager's office will sign off, and then we'll certainly be prepared to advise council in any way the city manager would like us to, sort of what the steps will be on a go forward.
Okay, finally, and my last comment, Mayor, is just regarding page 7. You list all the other economic drivers in addition to the public admin or government sectors of Ottawa, and I just want to underscore health services. Not just the new Civic that's being built. They have plans to redevelop the current Civic location. The Ottawa Hospital is talking about expansion of the General. The next probably 2 decades, there's going to be significant health services growth in this city. again, high-paying jobs. Just brief comment on this. It's not really mentioned in the report, but what are your thoughts?
Mr. Mayor, you're right, very important part of the economy, and there is projects going on around that, as you said, with the new Ottawa Hospital. I know the University of Ottawa is building an advanced medical research center as well, so right now that is a high economic impact project for us that we are supporting, and we do provide sort of that life sciences support through Invest Ottawa as well.
I would further add, if I may, that development in the healthcare sector is about quality of life. So beyond things like affordability and the availability of a good nightlife and festivals and events, certainly healthcare, recreation, and those other things are part of quality of life, which is a major consideration for talent attraction. So everything is linked.
Okay, thank you. Just before we vote, I just wanted to add a couple of quick comments. First of all, thank you to the team for all the work that went into this this report and the scope of issues that you cover and plan to tackle through the report. On specifically the topic of our conversations with other levels of government about some of the issues that were raised, I wanted to speak to that for a moment because a few things were said about that, and it is my job as the mayor to lead and participate in the negotiations with other levels of government on a number of different topics. So I see that as my mandate and my responsibility and a big part of my job. And just in the last week alone, for example, we hosted the Big City Mayors Conference here in Ottawa, and I had conversations with a number of other mayors from across the city. As Kathy mentioned, we had the Mayor's Breakfast where the industry minister was the guest. I had conversations with 2 or 3 other federal ministers last week. I went to Toronto and met with the Premier and 2 provincial ministers. I met with the Mayor of Toronto. And in all of these conversations, the point that I make on a regular basis is that Ottawa is unique, that Ottawa is the capital of Canada. We are a government town and also a business town. We have significant economic sectors like tourism and technology and others. We are a bilingual city. And in addition to that, as one of the 2 largest cities in Ontario, Toronto and Ottawa are kind of in a category of our own where we face challenges, significant challenges that are different from most of the other cities in Ontario. So we are active in these discussions and negotiations with other levels of government. We are not silent on these issues. We are working closely with the other levels of government to make sure that Ottawa gets its fair share of funding for our priorities and that our economy is part of the discussion when federal and provincial cabinet meetings are happening and when issues are being discussed and the future of the province and the future of the country are on the agenda. Okay, so with that, let's vote. We are converting the direction to a motion, so if we could vote first on the motion by Councillor Curry. Is that carried? Thank you. The motion by Councillor DeRuse, is that carried? Carried. And the item is amended, is that carried?
Carried.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll now move to item 8.1, the corporate sponsorship and advertising policies. And I believe we have a brief presentation from staff, and then we will go to delegations.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the committee. Bonjour, Monsieur le Maire, membres du comité. On est ici aujourd'hui pour vous présenter une politique qui est mise à jour sur les commandites et la publicité de la ville. So our presentation today touches on the renewal of a sponsorship and advertising policy for the city. I have with me Ingrid Mezzo-McDonald. She is the manager for our sponsorship, advertising, and donations initiatives within our CFS and more broadly corporately. First slide, please. So as a bit of background, the policy that we're operating under right now dates back to 2005 when there was an initiative not unlike our current review of services that looked at opportunities both to create efficiencies and generate new revenues. And born out of that initiative was the centralization of sponsorships and advertising, and with a goal to generate new revenues to the city, but also to enhance programs to the extent that that was possible. The 2005 initiative had some very aggressive revenue targets because it was plugging directly into city budgets. Currently, just to give you an idea, our target is $1.75 million, and on an annual basis, depending on the economy and other things, we probably come in at $500,000 short of meeting that goal. The pandemic, as with a lot of things, was difficult on this. Advertising was curtailed, sponsorships, discussions were put on pause. And for our own existing sponsorships, primarily naming rights, what it's required us to do is to extend the term, because during the 2 or 3 years of pandemic, eyes on the facility and on the sponsor name was not there. And so Ingrid has negotiated with most of our sponsors a refreshed agreement that, for the most part, extends, I believe, 5 of the 7 naming opportunities that we have. Next slide, please. So what we were looking at when we set out to do this, and we benchmarked against other municipalities and current trends, as you might imagine with the 2005 policy, it was not up to date in terms of current market conditions, in terms of the increasing trend, and we've come quite a ways from 2005 towards the digital world and digital screens as advertising, and less static publicity and more dynamic digital. We are recommending for this policy that we separate the advertising and the sponsorship policies. They are very different beasts in themselves. Advertising, for the most part, the city does very little direct selling of its advertising. It primarily contracts with firms that specialize in this to go out and gather advertising opportunities for us. And that is true for things like billboards, for rink boards, for indoor digital screens. We're not knocking on doors selling individual ads. What we are doing is packaging city opportunities for the private sector. Sponsorships are a little bit different in that for those, we are negotiating specific contracts. They're not off the shelf. We are trying to attract primarily local firms to look at things like naming rights opportunities or the sponsorship of programs. And when we set out to do this, one of the things that we discussed early on is that the current policy really doesn't allow us to be very nimble in terms of reacting to opportunities in the market that comes up. So you will see, as part of the recommendations here, that we have tried to streamline a little bit our approval processes while maintaining a balance so that there is still an opportunity for members of council, for community to have input where it matters the most. Next slide, please. So our advertising policy, as I mentioned, creates new definitions and brings us into the digital world, which is primarily where a lot of the advertising is going now. Something that I think will be of discussion today is advocacy advertising. We've had advocacy advertising as something that exists in various programs for some time. And staff, to be honest, have been a little bit, struggling a little bit in terms of how to deal with this. what we have done and what we've evolved to, which our advertising policy recognizes, is that for those that we do accept as advertising on city assets, that we make it crystal clear on the ad itself that the person conveying the message, whether it's the fossil fuel ones that is of more recent discussion, or any other advocacy point of view, and some of them are more benign, some of them are, milk is great for you, eat more eggs, those kinds of advocacy things. We are a federal city, and so a lot of those advertising advocacy pieces are aimed at the political level and trying to change or amend legislation, so we recognize that. Since 2019, we have also been operating under information that was provided through a council inquiry that clearly indicated that municipal advertising is subject to charter rights, and that if the city is going to look at limiting or refusing certain types of publicity, that we need to follow a process. It needs to be transparent. And by and large, the our Advertising Standards Canada has been our touchstone. They have, a code of 14 areas that they regulate, as well as some fairly in-depth interpretation of those that gets into what does all this mean in terms of regulating and limiting certain types of advertising, and the context under which they should be limited. So our policy currently reflects that approach, and I believe that'll be a piece of discussion for today. In terms of sponsorships, we're looking at delegated authority so that we can do more quickly, giving the opportunity to staff to finalize deals that often are an opportunity in the marketplace for a sponsor, but that can disappear very quickly. And the notion of several weeks to write a report and go to council is often a bit of a opportunity lost for us. So we're looking at that, increasing the financial authority for staff and the length of agreements, simply because as time has evolved, cost of living and everything else has increased the value of some of the deals that we're looking at. And lastly, we're looking for support to start to look at a next phase of billboard advertising. We've undertaken 2, I believe, so far, that Ingrid has been working on, and there are opportunities with significant revenues to further expand the use of city sites for billboards. So, Mr. Mayor, I will stop there.
Thank you. So we are going to go to delegations, but just before we do, Councillor Menard, I know you have a motion. If you'd like to introduce that now, then that can be part of the discussion going forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mayor. Thanks to staff for all your work and your assistance with information and for the report in front of us. The motion is on fossil fuel advertising review. Whereas the city's updated sponsorship policy and advertising using city assets and program policy maintains the practice of accepting advocacy advertising with the condition that the ads clearly indicate that they are paid ads and who paid for them. And whereas the updated policy specifies that advertising must not impact the quality and integrity of the city's properties, programs, buildings, streetscapes, or digital spaces, and for advocacy advertisements must indicate the source organization paying for the advertising to ensure transparency and avoid perception of city endorsement. And whereas the city has accepted paid sponsorships for rink board advertising in select arenas that advances pro-oil and gas fossil fuel industry advertisements, and whereas the current contracts for fossil fuel advertising on rink boards runs until November 2024, and the OC Transpo contract runs until June 8th, 2024, and whereas the advertising programs for OC Transpo's assets are formally exempt from the provisions set out in the city's advertising policy, but are routinely reviewed by staff to align with the Recreation, Culture, and Facility Services policy and best practices. And whereas the city has excluded certain types of advertising in the past from its policy, including tobacco, and guns on the basis that they adversely impact the quality and integrity of the city's properties, programs, buildings, streetscapes, or digital spaces. Therefore, be it resolved that staff review a change to the updated advertising using city assets and programs policy that would examine options around fuel advocacy advertising, considering the alignment of city policies, outcomes related to lowering GHG emissions, reputational risks, and legal implications. And be it further resolved that staff present options for advancing the matter and report back to the Finance and Corporate Services Committee for consideration by Q3 of 2024. And therefore be it resolved that any future changes to fossil fuel advertising under the city's updated policy be considered by Transit Services staff, and that any resulting amendments proposed to OC transport policies be brought to the Transit Commission for timely consideration. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. We'll now open it up to the delegations, and the first is from Angela Keller-Herzog. And I'll just remind everybody that you have 5 minutes. So you don't have to take the whole 5 minutes, but I will be asking you to stop at 5 minutes. I'll treat every delegation equally on that score. Angela, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much. So my name is Angela Keller-Herzog. I'm the Executive Director of CAFES, the Community Associations for Environmental Sustainability. Et voilà, there is my visual presentation. Thank you. So next slide, please. I'm going to try to go through the front part quickly so I make it on time, Mr. Mayor. So CAFES is a network of local environmental leaders. We've existed for over a decade, and we are working hard to have representation also in rural and suburban areas. Next slide, please. In terms of, that's the overview of my presentation. Next slide, please. So the context, next slide. The context for this advertising policy renewal is that we're looking at deteriorating trust in public institutions. And I think this is causing difficulty in a whole range of policy areas. We are having a changing media environment, and we have municipal budget pressures, which all of you are very aware of. Next slide, please. So this slide is probably hard to read, but it is a good news slide. This slide is based on a survey from July 2023, and it shows that municipal governments are surprisingly trusted as information by citizens. And in Ontario, that holds true as well. And you can see that municipal governments and municipal information is more trusted than that coming from, say, banks, from the Government of Canada, the federal Government of Canada, and obviously from social media. Now, why is this relevant? It is important what the municipality is projecting. It's important what is said, and it is important what is permitted to be said in public spaces, including in public dialogue spaces like this meeting. So these are actually pretty deep and fundamental issues that play into this policy decision. Next slide, please. So we've had a look at the old policy and the new policy, and we see that in the old policy, particularly as articulated in the 2011 corporate partnerships policy, which was really the articulation of the sponsorship and advertising policy, there was a balance struck in terms of maximizing revenue opportunities on one side and then safeguarding the city's corporate interests on the other side. And the policy statement was very clear in that the advertising should not compromise or contradict any policy or bylaw of the city. That was clearly stated. Next slide, please. So the draft advertising policy that we're looking now, I think doesn't have this balance. I think that it definitely has the emphasis on revenue generation, and definitely we support and understand that. But the safeguards are not in the policy statement. The safeguards are delegated to departmental managers, where it then says that city departments ensure that all relevant city bylaws and policies are adhered to. And I think this is a vulnerability and a legal liability. And why is that? Next slide, please. It's because there is a risk of bad actors. I'll tell you something that few people know. About 25 years ago, I used to smoke menthol cigarettes. And there was information out there. I know you run marathons, so you think this is terrible, but I quit, I promise.
Don't judge, don't judge.
Well, it was a bad idea. But there was advertising out there telling me that menthol cigarettes were to be preferred. They were fresh, you know, my breath would be better. We now have bad actors out there that tell us all kinds of things. And some of these bad actors are very well funded. So we're seeing information, for example, that say that natural gas, which we know is a fossil fuel, will save the planet. Not so. And there's also information out there, closer to the heart and the interest of this policy, is that Ottawa's climate change and energy plans would ruin the city and kill thousands of people. This is out there on the internet. Do we want to have this in our advertising? Would we allow that? That would be Tom, and he is funded. Next slide, please. So there is a problem with climate misinformation. Let's see, where's my clock? I never see the clock.
You have about 5 seconds left,
Okay,
unfortunately.
so there's a problem with misinformation. Next slide, please. Cafes, we're trying to do our part. We have a volunteer team. There's citizen concern about climate misinformation. So our recommendations are, 1, include policy safeguards in the policy, and 2, include, actually, next slide, please, include a specific safeguard for climate misinformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Menard?
Sorry, just very quickly, Mayor, thank you. Angela, you said that there's climate misinformation out there and that the city should do its part in combating that. I'm just wondering what you have in mind specifically.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. So the level of climate literacy is actually surprisingly low out there. And part of I mean, there's reasons for it. Most people are not able to get up in the morning and what, in my mind, is sort of look the monster in the face, in the eyes. The fact that our whole planet is going up in flames, most people don't get up in the morning and that's the first thing they get anxious about. But in terms of you as policy leaders, it's actually your job to worry about that. It's your job to understand the threats that are facing our city and our planet. So in terms of having public education strategies, maybe we could look at what there was done by Ottawa Public Health for COVID in terms of educating people. In terms of combating specific climate misinformation, when there's information out there that the rising levels of CO2 are great for agriculture, is that so true? I don't think so. Maybe the city should be looking at how changing weather patterns and variability is impacting on the farmers in our region, just to pick a rural issue. So there's a lot of specific misinformation, climate misinformation, that the city could be also combating and addressing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Next is William Van Geest. Good morning. You have to push the button to turn on the mic. There you go.
Got it. Is that working now? Thank you. Great. I can go ahead?
Go ahead whenever you're ready, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair and Committee, for the opportunity to address you, which I'm doing on behalf of Ecology Ottawa. Today I'll speak about examples of the advertisements that we think the city's corporate sponsorship and advertising policy should prohibit, and then about how permitting such advertisements directly contradicts City Council's values and commitments. I'll ask to go to the next slide. So the first ad I'd like to show is one at Brewer Arena. It reads, "Canadian oil and natural gas is part of the solution." The URL provided, climateactioncanada.ca, strongly implies that the solution, that the problem here is climate change. We know, however, that fossil fuels are very much the problem, which is why Council's energy evolution strategy calls for a full phase-out of fossil fuels by 2050. In fact, fossil fuels are the primary human cause of climate change, according to the EPA. How then can fossil fuels be the solution? I've got a couple other ads here. I'll ask the slide to be advanced. Thank you. So another one from the same group reads, Canadian liquefied natural gas exports will reduce global emissions. We know very well that they won't. What the industry calls natural gas is predominantly methane, of course, which traps heat in the atmosphere about 20 times more than carbon dioxide. Next slide, please. Another ad cynically states that, I'm quoting, global oil and natural gas demand is growing, implying that we should get in on this demand. In fact, this is exactly what another ad calls for, so that's the next slide, which reads, as long as the world needs oil and natural gas, shouldn't it be Canadian? These ads are urging our complicity, even our cooperation with our planet's trajectory toward climate disaster. And yet, these are currently displayed to Ottawans, including the many children who enjoy these facilities and are forming their opinions. Facilities, of course, like the arena in the first ad. I also want to mention how these ads seem to run against the city's own sponsorship and advertising policy. Next slide, please. This policy reads, oh, I'm sorry, this is mixed up a little bit here. Next slide, please. Thank you. So again, quoting the policy, all sponsorships and advertising shall be consistent with the City of Ottawa's vision, mission, and values, and will not compromise or contradict any bylaw or policy of the city, or reflect negatively on the city's public image. And later, the city will not solicit or accept sponsorship or advertising from companies whose reputation could prove detrimental to the city's public image and or whose main business is derived from the support of or involvement in the production, distribution, and sale of life-threatening products. Accepting advertising money from fossil fuel promoters certainly reflects negatively on the city's public image, and fossil fuel products put the city's assets at risk and threaten lives. In the words of the Supreme Court of Canada, climate change is an existential challenge. It is a threat of the highest order to the country and indeed to the world. And we in Ottawa know how climate change is life-threatening. Previous slide, please. Last year, we, and particularly our children and those with respiratory difficulties, struggled under smoke from wildfires exacerbated by climate change. We also experienced 3 tornadoes. One in Barrhaven damaged 125 homes. The derecho the previous year cost the city $50 million. And it also cost the family their father and husband. I think you'll agree that the $6,000, that's right, $6,000 of annual revenue that fossil fuel ads generate for the city do not compare to this destruction. The city here has an opportunity to live up to its vision, mission, and values that the policy refers to by ending fossil fuel ads in city facilities, as it did in 2005 to prohibit smoking advertisements. Continuing to permit fossil fuel promotion would also seem to contradict the city's own approach on climate. We, of course, declared a climate emergency in 2019. We also committed to our energy evolution strategy, which calls for a full phase-out of fossil fuels by 2050. And of course, this council signed on to the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty in 2022. Thus, permitting fossil fuel promotion, in fact, is inconsistent with the city's, quoting the policy here, vision, mission, and values, and does compromise or contradict bylaws and policies of the city. Fossil fuel promotion has no place in our city, and we urge you to end it in your revision of the city's corporate sponsorship and advertising policy. This is an opportunity for the city to show leadership and live up to its values and commitments.
Okay, thank you. That was well timed. Appreciate it. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is Sam Hirsch.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hi. I'll begin now. So this product leads to increased risk of cancer, respiratory diseases, and causes 34,000 deaths each year in Canada, and that's 1 in 7 premature deaths. And no, I'm not talking about the dangers of cigarette and tobacco smoke, but about fossil fuels and the pollution that stems from it. Just like tobacco, fossil fuels cause unmitigated harm, not only to our environment, but also other human beings. The only difference is that nearly 25 years ago, the City of Ottawa, Ottawa City Council took a bold step and agreed to end the practice of tobacco advertising. Today, myself and other delegates are asking you to be bold once again and do the same for fossil fuel advertising. A ban on fossil fuel ads would be wholly consistent with the city's stated goals and current policy initiatives, like the previous delegate just mentioned, such as declaring a climate emergency in 2019, the city's Energy Evolution Program, excuse me, to get the city to net zero, and signing on to the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty in 2022, a global effort to foster international cooperation to accelerate a transition to renewable energy for everyone, and the expansion of coal, oil, and gas, and equitably phase out existing production of fossil fuels. I think you would all agree that fossil fuel ads are very inconsistent with these three stated things. And this is an easy thing for the city to do, to bring us further towards our goal of being a greener city. And I say easy because the cost of the city here is virtually nothing. According to staff, along with the bus ads and rink ads, so that's those together, the city receives a little over $10,000 in revenue. That's it. There's no billion-dollar ask or a big project ask here. I think that the millions of dollars we stand to lose, as well as the thousands of lives that will be affected and already have been affected by drastic changes in weather and extreme weather events, is worth a lot more than $10,000. I hope that the councillors sitting around this table also agree with that. And, you know, I don't think the issue with the ads is just that we see around our city on buses and hockey rinks is just that they're misleading, and they are misleading, as some delegates have already shown, ads saying that oil and gas are the solution to climate change, which we obviously know is absurd and untrue. But it's that they're advertising it all, given that we have a stated goal of trying to reach net zero. Ottawa has a fossil fuel problem, and the solution clearly isn't trying to send the message that oil and gas are the solution to climate change. An argument that has also reared its head quite a bit is the issue of free speech. And again, the tobacco example is one that is important to look at for this. You know, as the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment have noted, risks to public health are not protected under freedom of expression. This is already something tobacco companies tried to argue and lost. In 1995, the Supreme Court ruled that a national public health problem of substantial and pressing concern overrides narrow corporate interests of profit. So in fact, there is legal precedent for this. Consumer choice advocates defend advertising as necessary to, you know, break into the industry, but most natural gas companies, for example, are monopolies. And, you know, there are not many newcomers in the market. And there's already a lot of prohibitions and restrictions on advertising on many products that exist in Canada. Another argument that I've seen from City of Ottawa staff is that the city policy has to reflect or stay in line with federal policy. But let's see what councillors were saying when tobacco advertising was being debated. And as far back as 1986, former Ottawa Mayor Jim Durrell said, and I quote, "It's time junior levels of government showed some leadership on the issue to convince the federal government to ban all tobacco advertising." And I echo that sentiment here today. It's time for our city to finally take some leadership and have an advertising policy that reflects our current initiatives and the bold steps we need to take to ensure we don't continue to fall deeper into a climate crisis we can no longer mitigate. You know, I'm glad that we see Councillor Menard's motion here today, and I think it's an all right first step, but I'll be frank, it doesn't get us anywhere near where we need to go here. And I'll read something I read this morning, which I think captures this approach quite well. The problem with incremental change is that the rest of the world moves quickly, not incrementally, and to be incremental is to lose ground, arriving at small changes years or decades too late, by which time those changes no longer move the needle, they even pencil. Last week, there was a thunderstorm in February. Yesterday was the hottest March 4th in recorded history in Ottawa. It's time we took the climate crisis seriously and used all the tools at our disposal to show that you're taking the climate crisis seriously. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Next is Julia Levin.
Hello.
Go ahead whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. My name is Julia Levin, and I'm speaking to you today, both as a resident of Ottawa, as well as on behalf of my organization, Environmental Defence Canada. We're a national environmental advocacy organization. And for the last 5 years, I've been pushing governments in Canada to be more ambitious in their efforts to tackle the climate crisis. And what has become really obvious is that the biggest barrier in this country to climate action is the oil and gas industry. And it's for this reason that I'm here today to speak in support of the proposal calling on the City of Ottawa to prohibit the advertisement and promotion of fossil fuels and sponsorship by fossil fuel companies. 2023 was a disastrous year with climate-related disasters hitting almost every part of our planet, including Ottawa, and this year is set to be even worse. We know that we're on a catastrophic path and that unless we urgently transition off of fossil fuels, we face the collapse of everything that sustains us. We also know it didn't have to be this way. If oil and gas companies hadn't spent the last 50 years doing everything in their power to obstruct climate action, we would be in a very different place today. Companies like Exxon and Imperial, they have been studying the impacts of their oil and gas products on the climate since the 1970s. That means they've known for the past 50 years that their products were going to destroy our planet's ability to sustain life. Did they decide in the 1970s or in the 80s or in the 90s that they would change course and invest in new forms of energy? No. Instead, they invested massively into huge campaigns to discredit climate science and climate solutions. They lied to the public. They funded climate denial groups. They fought against any rules or oversight that might impact their profits. And all of this has been thoroughly documented. Now that the impacts of the climate crisis are being experienced firsthand, it's become impossible for these companies to promote the same kind of climate denial. Their new approach is to position themselves as part of the solution, and we've seen those advertisements from previous delegates. But their only motivation is to prolong business as usual, delay the necessary energy transition, and make as much profit for their shareholders as possible. Oil and gas companies know the importance of obtaining social license. That's why they spend hundreds of millions of dollars each year in advertising and sponsorship campaigns. And it's not just the climate impacts that their advertising is seeking to mislead the public on. It's also the immediate health impacts. The pollution that comes from burning fossil fuels causes approximately 34,000 premature deaths in Canada each year. That's 1 in every 7 premature deaths across the country. And these are the dirty truths that oil and gas companies want to hide from Canadians. And this is where you come in. You have a choice, much like your colleagues did 20 years ago when councillors decided to ban advertising and sponsorship from the tobacco industry. Now again, we are facing an industry whose profit model is based on causing enormous harm to the people of Ottawa and the world. And you can decide that at least in these facilities, you won't allow these companies to mislead the residents of Ottawa or buy social license through advertisements and sponsorship. You have the opportunity to set an important precedent for cities around the country and around the world. But of course, you won't be alone. Other cities around the world have placed and are placing bans and restrictions on fossil fuel advertising, like Amsterdam, Sydney, and Liverpool, to name just a few. And some cities are going much further. They're actually suing oil and gas companies, and that includes Chicago, just a couple of weeks ago announced a lawsuit, but also San Francisco, New York, BC, and countless other cities. So you will be in good company. And I urge you to add Ottawa to the growing list of cities showing real climate leadership by banning all advertising and sponsorship from oil and gas in city facilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, the only name I have next on my list is James. I don't know. Okay. Open invitation to anybody named James, but let's go on to Elizabeth Holding. Welcome. Just turn on the microphone in front of you there, please. Thanks.
It's working now. Hello, committee. Thank you for having me. My name is Elizabeth Holding. I am a physiotherapist at CHEO and a resident of Ottawa Centre. In my job, I travel from downtown all the way to Rockland to deliver physiotherapy across 8 different school boards in the Ottawa area. I am speaking today to urge the City Council to adopt the motion to ban oil and gas from city advertising. This motion aims to treat oil and gas advertising the same as we treat tobacco advertising, as a serious threat to human health. Oil and gas carbon emissions pose an existential threat to the children that I work with every day as a physiotherapist. It threatens them with dirty, unbreathable air from forest fires. We saw this in Ottawa just last summer cancerous air forced families to shut up inside their houses. It threatens them with heat domes like the one in BC, which killed over 500 people in one day. And who knows if this year that will be Ottawa instead. And perhaps the scariest of all, it threatens to destabilize our food and healthcare systems. Every week, as a part of my job, I travel to dozens of schools across Ottawa and deliver physiotherapy services to the kids who will make up the generations to come. The wonderful, funny, and clever kids that I work with are those who are most at risk from illness from the climate crisis. They are sensitive to heat, they are at higher risk of respiratory illness, they rely heavily on a stable healthcare system to meet their complex medical needs. When our healthcare systems are overburdened from natural disasters and climate-related crises, their needs get pushed aside. Life-altering or life-saving surgeries get put on hold. As a physiotherapist, part of my job is making sure that all kids can be active, can move their bodies, can have fun. But every summer, there's an increasing number of days that it is simply unsafe for these kids to go outside. In fact, some days it is unsafe for any kids to go outside. Low-income families without access to air conditioning face even more dangerous situations with rising heat, and sometimes even have to seek refuge in public spaces. We say we care about our kids above all. We say kids are our future. So why are we allowing advertising for products that are stealing that future from them? A rapid transition towards renewables with good jobs and the workers involved are the only solution. Ottawa City Council has already declared a climate emergency in 2019 and committed to the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty in 2022. But it's time for us to act on these commitments. A ban on tobacco advertising was one of the most important tools in successfully targeting the rampant misinformation that served to confuse the science on the harms of smoking and inflate corporate profits. Fossil fuels are no different. We need a clear message from our City Council that we value in our children and the generations to come more than fossil profits. Thank you, everyone, for your consideration.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We'll go next to Letitia Charbonneau.
Hello.
Hi, go ahead.
Hi. I'd like to turn on my camera, but I'm not being allowed. There we go. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the committee for giving me time to present. I'm speaking as a retired school teacher and a member of Seniors for Climate Action Now, Ottawa. I first saw those fossil fuel ads on City Street near Parliament Hill in November and spent 2 months trying to get to the bottom of why these ads were being allowed on city streets and OC Transpo buses. It took me 2 months to come up with very little information. It's not easy to access information from OC Transpo. I got more information from the advertising company responsible for advertising on city buses. I did get a name, but I was unable to speak to the person at OC Transpo responsible for authorizing those gigantic fossil fuel ads on the sides of our buses. Seniors for Climate Action at Ottawa started a working group to get to the bottom of this and to try and present a motion to council to ban fossil fuel ads. And 12 other groups in the city, all at the same time, because of, I guess, outrage at seeing these ads everywhere, we all happened to have the same concerns and joined together to plead with City Council to ban these ads. The organizations behind these ads pretend to be pleading on behalf of Canada's economy and are trying to convince us that fossil fuels, in particular liquid gas, methane in other words, are part of the solution to the problems presented by climate change. This is ludicrous. We know this isn't true. This campaign of fossil fuel disinformation has been going on for decades, and it's infuriating to think that it may still be having the desired outcomes by their proponents. The City of Ottawa is obliged to follow the guidelines in the Competition Bureau's advertising standards. The Competition Act explicitly prohibits businesses from making material misrepresentations to the public to advance their business interests. The fossil fuel industry, thanks to its own scientific research, has long known that continued use of fossil fuels would trigger climate change and misled us about it for decades. We cannot continue to allow deceptive advertising to repeat its successful sabotage of action on climate change. Today, it would be far easier to manage the climate emergency if remedial action had been taken decades ago. The new campaign is no longer to deny climate change, but to argue that fossil fuel industry is part of the solution, and therefore no new government regulation or interference is necessary. The Competition Act has almost never been used to combat the flood of greenwashing ads in Canada, but there are ongoing investigations that may rectify that and push us towards following Europe's example. The City of Ottawa must not wait until this reform takes place to implement rigorous standards and screening tools in order to prevent misleading advertising from being approved and its citizens exposed to climate change disinformation. The advertising guidelines must be congruent and coherent with its climate emergency master plan in order for there to be no confusion about how serious and urgent dealing with climate change really is. I would hope the sponsorship policy would also reflect this. The fact that the policy would make it clear that the ads do not reflect the city's position is not good enough. Charter rights as well seem to be poorly interpreted when it comes to freedom of expression. I would expect better from the city's legal team. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll go next to Mark Brooks. Go ahead.
Hello, hi everybody. My name is Mark Brooks. I'm here just on behalf of myself. I'm not representing any organization. I'm an Ottawa resident in Jeff's ward, Westboro, Councillor Leeper, and I teach at Algonquin College, and I have a daughter just a few blocks away at De La Salle. And I don't really have any prepared remarks. I think you've heard some really good points. I'm speaking in favor of the motion. I just wanted to maybe add this perspective as from my experience teaching environmental studies. Students at Algonquin, they are pretty worried about the climate crisis, very, very worried about their future. And they feel like not nearly enough is being done, and they feel hopeless. They feel anxiety and eco-despair. It's this new term that we're hearing. And they're looking for leadership from people like yourselves. My daughter says, when we talk about climate, she says, oh, what's the point? We're all doomed. Why even bother trying? This is not the attitude that we want young people to have, right? We want them to have hope. And we want them to see that, no, people in positions of power do care, and they are trying to do the best they can. They are taking steps to address this crisis, right? So, you've already heard some good points, but it just seems to me like this would be a really important symbolic move for the City of Ottawa that wouldn't really cost that much, let's face it. And it would show leadership, right? You've already heard about the climate threats, you've heard about the health impacts, you've heard about the comparison to tobacco, and I just want to say that these ads are not just neutral ads, right? They're not just even promoting a product. What we're seeing is a deliberate attempt to confuse and mislead people into thinking that fossil fuels are part of the solution. And for me, it's like tobacco companies saying, well, you know, maybe 30 years ago, advertising that, well, tobacco is going to be here for decades, right? People are always going to need tobacco products, so why not make it Canadian tobacco or something like that? Nobody would accept something like that. So I just think this is a small gesture that Ottawa could take, but it's an important one. And do it for the kids, right? It sounds cliche, but you know, I do really think that these small steps, these incremental steps can make a difference. Big change often comes through just small actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation. Councillor Curry?
Thank you.
Sorry,
I actually have a
if you
question
don't mind
for you.
just waiting for a second, I have a question for you.
Thank you for coming to talk to us today. This topic is near and dear to my heart. My son did an undergraduate degree in environmental science. Now he's doing a master's in environmental engineering and climate science with a climate change specialty. And he's full of hope. And so, I mean, we listened to Minister Champlain talk about how leaders need to bring hope to kids. And I'm wondering, you know, when you are teaching, you have all these kids listening to your every word, hopefully hanging off of it. What hope are you bringing to them other than, you know, maybe we might not advertise? I mean, what about the concept of the technology we have? I mean, remember, I'm Canada North Technology Park, right? And the technology we have available to us right now that will help climate change and that, you know, kids should maybe understand more about that. What type of hope are you bringing to them?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a good one. And I should clarify to say that this problem of eco-anxiety, eco-despair, whatever you want to call it, is real and it does exist. But there are also young people who have hope and who are doing amazing things in their communities and not just accepting that, you know, this is the way it's going to be, there's nothing we can do. So for me personally, in answer to your question, I always try to tell my students that the case is, it's not hopeless. It absolutely, we are, you know, there's a certain amount of warming baked in, right? We know that. We're looking at 2 degrees, potentially 3 degrees this century. But that's a lot different from 4 degrees, 5 degrees, right? If we don't act, if we don't do everything that we can to try to minimize emissions going forward, then it's going to be much, much worse. So there is a lot still to fight for, absolutely. And then I would talk about exactly what you're saying. Look at the things that people are doing. Look at what organizations are doing, what individuals and people are, like the commitment. Look at somebody like Greta Thunberg, what she's been able to achieve. So that's just one individual. So don't think that, no, it's pointless, it's hopeless. And I have this conversation with my daughter. I say, that attitude is not going to get us anywhere. There's amazing technologies. I mean, just think how far renewables have come in the last 10, 20 years. Nobody thought that they'd take up so much, that they would grow so quickly. Are they there yet? No, they're not. Are we where we want to be? No. But there's reason to be hopeful. There's reason to think that we can keep fighting and we can really make some tremendous progress.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you again. We'll go next to Thomas Dedman. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, committee members, councilors, for having me here today. My name is Thomas Dedman. I'm a second-year education student at the University of Ottawa and an occasional teacher with the OCDSB. I'm speaking here today in favor of this motion, of Motion 8.1, because of the importance for our city to be seen as taking leadership on climate change for our young people. The Ontario curriculum requires us to teach students about climate change. But almost any teacher can report to you, and indeed as we just heard from the last delegate, students are feeling a lot of climate anxiety. And students are feeling abandoned when it comes to how to address climate change. Fossil fuel company advertising does only one thing, and that is to mislead and redirect the conversation in order to delay the transition away from fossil fuels. When cigarette companies faced bans on their ads, they argued that the ads were meant to sway brand choice, not to increase smoking. But we rightfully rejected that reasoning. Cigarette advertising was meant to get more people to smoke. And in perhaps an even more direct way, fossil fuel advertising is meant to increase the use of fossil fuels at a time that we need to be transitioning to renewable resources. Our students deserve to have a livable and healthy future, but they also can't be expected to fight for that future all on their own. The City of Ottawa needs to be an ally and a leader in the shift away from fossil fuels. It's great to have students coming into class excited about having taken an electric bus for the first time. It's great to be able to talk to our students about the fact that Ottawa has declared a climate state of emergency. And these things provide some of that hope that the councillor just talked about before and how important that is. But at the same time, when these same students are then leaving school and seeing ads at the community center they get after school care for fossil fuels, or seeing ads at the hockey arena for fossil fuels, they're feeling abandoned by our leaders. Students know that fossil fuels can't be a part of our future. I think all of us, if we're honest with ourselves, know that they can't be a part of our future. And so when we are allowing these advertisements to continue to be put out, we're tacitly endorsing the delay of addressing climate change. And we are letting down our students and letting down our young people and telling them that they're on their own to address this crisis. Motion 8.1 is a step in the right direction, and so I urge everyone to support it. I would, however, like to see this motion go farther, and I would like to see more immediate steps to ban this, but I do think that it's important that we take this step today. I urge committee members to pass the motion and create an opportunity for young people to see this chamber taking leadership to address the climate crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll go next to Shalitza Sajwani, who I believe is online.
Hello, my name is Shaliza Sajwani. I am the co-chair of the Canadian Association of Pharmacy for the Environment, and I'm also a cancer survivor. So just to provide some context, so the new Canadian Association of Pharmacy for the Environment, or otherwise known as CAPHE, basically focuses on the pharmacy profession's intersection with the climate crisis. So both focusing on climate mitigation with trying to reduce emissions and pollution, and also adaptation with trying to protect patients and pharmacy services from climate hazards as well. And only a few years ago, when I was 30 years old in 2018, I was suddenly diagnosed with invasive epithelial ovarian cancer myself. And I've received the first of many aggressive chemotherapy treatments. 2018, September 2018, many of you will remember that month. That same week of first aggressive chemotherapy treatment, Ottawa was overwhelmed by a total of 6 tornadoes, which wreaked havoc throughout the city, causing much economic damage, and it left many without power for a long time. I remember hiding in my home with no power for days, being terrified after returning from my first weekly chemotherapy treatment, worrying whether these tornadoes would affect my own incredible Ottawa Hospital Cancer Program, where I worked, the chemotherapy supply chains, as well as my own timely access to life-saving treatment. Of course, climate hazards have many, many downstream effects. Advocating for a ban on fossil fuel advertising is therefore critical from a community pharmacy perspective as well, due to the direct impact on operations, medication supply, life-saving medication supply, and economic damages. The pollutants that are released from fossil fuel combustion, as has been mentioned previously, not only exacerbate respiratory conditions, but also worsen cancers, cancer incidence and prevalence, lead to worsened cardiovascular mortality and worsened mental health issues, which is similar to what we were talking about earlier about eco-despair. And all of this increases the demand on pharmacy services. The surge in healthcare needs severely strains pharmacy operations, requiring additional resources to meet heightened demand for medications and healthcare products. Of course, pharmacies are also impacted by the economic repercussions of climate change, including disruptions to supply chains and increased operational costs as well. And by implementing a ban on fossil fuel advertising, the City Council can help mitigate some of these economic damages, both to pharmacies and elsewhere within the city, by reducing the prevalence of fossil fuel-related health issues, and therefore reducing the financial burden on pharmacies as well, and helping them to continue to provide essential healthcare as well. And of course, drawing a parallel to tobacco advertising, advocating for a ban on fossil fuel advertising from a pharmacy perspective is essential for a number of reasons. So similar to tobacco, fossil fuels also provide, and fossil fuel consumption also poses significant health risks, including to cardiovascular disease and mental health and respiratory diseases. And just as the ban of tobacco advertising aimed to reduce the prevalence of smoking and its associated health consequences, a ban on fossil fuel advertising would also help to mitigate help to mitigate the health effects of air pollution and climate change as well. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the ban on tobacco advertising is a precedent, and advocating on a ban on fossil fuel advertising underscores the importance of prioritizing public health. I just want to finish by saying that I often wonder what a similar group of people around a similar chamber would have been thinking about tobacco advertising years ago. And at some point, they made a choice. And that choice, even though it was later, it didn't happen in previous generations, it did help to save many, many lives to come. And it was critical for that choice to be made during that time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sharing your personal experience with us. Okay, we'll move to the next presentation. Eugenie Waters. I believe it's an online presentation.
Yep.
Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor and committee, for the opportunity to speak. My name is Eugenie Waters, and I'm a parent to 2 young children and a member of For Kids Ottawa Gatineau, which is a community of parents, grandparents, and families who join together to advocate for climate action. I'm also a family physician and a general practitioner in oncology, and have worked for over 11 years, both in family practice in the community here in Ottawa, as well as with hospitalized cancer patients at the Ottawa Hospital. As a physician, one of our main roles is to be a health advocate, both for our individual patients and for the community at large. And the climate crisis is a major health threat. Producing and burning fossil fuels creates air pollution that harms our health directly and generates toxic emissions that drive climate change. Every year, as you've already heard, fossil fuel production is directly linked to 34,000 premature deaths in Canada. And many more Canadians also suffer from negative health impacts, including conditions like cancer, heart attacks, strokes, and other cardiovascular and respiratory illnesses as a result of toxic emissions. From a child health point of view, Canada actually has the 3rd highest global rate of new childhood asthma cases from traffic pollution, so we should not be proud of this. The facts exist. Fossil fuels are really bad for our health, and the climate crisis is the greatest health threat of the 21st century, from increasing the frequency of extreme weather events to the spread of infectious diseases and the exacerbation of chronic health conditions. Here in Ottawa, we as residents are starting to see good work by city staff working on projects and programs for climate change mitigation and climate resilience across multiple departments. This is welcome and overdue, but of course needs to be further funded and accelerated. However, at the same time, the city is permitting advertising on city property that is blatant greenwashing by the oil and gas industry. Greenwashing is the dishonest advertising practice of pretending to be environmentally friendly while promoting fossil fuels and conveniently not mentioning their serious health risks. In the health sector, we've seen this strategy before. The tobacco industry's coordinated advertising program of public deception and denial regarding the health harms of cigarette smoking persisted for decades after the linkages between cigarettes and lung cancer and other serious diseases were well established. In the 1960s, more than half of Canadian adults smoked cigarettes, and now the rates have dropped to about 12%. One of the earliest and most impactful efforts to reduce smoking rates was to ban tobacco advertising. There is a reason the oil and gas industry is investing so heavily into advertising and marketing right now. They are trying to polish their image, mislead the public, cast doubt on established science, from denial of climate change to deadly delay tactics. I have two children. My younger son plays hockey, and at the start of the season, before we even saw them ourselves, I had fellow hockey parent friends texting me with photos of the green rink board ads that they had seen at various City of Ottawa arenas with misleading slogans like Canadian oil and natural gas is part of the solution, and featuring a logo that says Canada Action in the corner of the board ad. By the time my son had played or practiced at arenas with these ads, I had also spotted OC Transpo buses plastered with similarly harmful and dishonest messaging, and later saw this ad campaign at bus shelters as well. In and around Ottawa, we have recently experienced devastating climate-related events like dangerous air quality from forest fires and heat waves and floods, as well as damaging storms like the derecho affecting people's homes, businesses, and destroying infrastructure and property, both within the urban area and surrounding farmlands, certainly affecting agriculture as well. Across Canada, these events have claimed thousands of lives in recent years. As a city, we need to tackle the climate emergency in a unified way to have the maximum impact to protect our residents and our infrastructure, including our healthcare infrastructure, and reduce life-threatening and harmful health impacts and minimize economic losses. We really need the city across all its varied activities and departments to row in the same direction. To do this, the city should not permit advertising of fossil fuel companies who attempt to promote their harmful products and minimize or outright lie about the risk to our health and our security. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. We'll go next to Dr. Hussein Molu.
Hi.
Hi, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks so much for giving me a chance to present to you. I'm in the middle of clinic, so hopefully the audio is okay. So I'm a colorectal surgeon at the Ottawa Hospital, and I also am the Director of Planetary Health for the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Ottawa. Actually, was the first of its kind of type of position created because the Faculty of Medicine did that because they realized what a big issue climate change is. As I'm sure you've heard, because I looked at your list of presenters, people much smarter than me have presented already. But as you know, climate change is the #1 threat to the health of humanity. And so that's why the Faculty of Medicine created that position. And in fact, the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada also created a planetary health position, which is a position I also hold. I also have a Master of Public Health from Harvard. So I think with climate change being the #1 threat to the health of humanity, you're seeing all sorts of health organizations align around trying to not only mitigate now what's going on, but also adapt. Because as we all know, from I think the Rideau Canal sending us a very clear message, climate change is here. And so when we look at that, we know that fossil fuels are the main reason that that's happening. The science is indisputable. And we also know that, for example, air pollution kills more people now than smoking does. So I guess when you start looking at things like advertising and continuing the advertising of fossil fuel companies, then analogous to the logic that would support that thinking, then we should probably support the advertising of cigarette smoking as well. In public places and hockey arenas and things like that. And so I think that runs counter to kind of everything that we are seeing right now that is happening. And so as a concerned citizen, educator, someone with a background in public health, someone who's trying to educate, medical students, residents, healthcare professionals across the country, as well as someone who has 2 daughters, and someone who cares about future generations. I come in front of you very humbly to say I really, really think that, we need to, in terms of this bill, banning fossil fuel advertising, just it makes sense with everything that we're seeing. And I'm sure you've heard from a lot of people, so I will leave my comments there and not use up my last 2 minutes, but I'm happy to answer any questions if it helps clarify anything. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for your time. Thank you for your presentation. We'll go next to Una Ferguson, also online.
Good morning, Mayor Sutcliffe and councillors. I'm Una Ferguson. I'm chair of the Retired Nurses Interest Group as part of the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario, and I've lived in Ottawa for over 40 years in College Ward. I speak in favour of the motion to ban fossil fuel ads. Ottawa is seeing more devastating storms each year due to climate change. Each storm destroys more trees, which compromises the air we breathe. The trees are nature's air cleaners. Our planet is also heating up, so we're seeing more volcanic eruptions which spew ash into the air. And of course, the world and Canada have seen devastating forest fires. As an asthmatic myself, I know I found it difficult to breathe last summer, as did many elderly people and children, and I spent many days indoors, fortunately not in hospital. I would hate to think that future generations would be a respirator-wearing society because we have done nothing now to address the climate change. Children have up to a 42% increased risk of asthma, comparable to living with a smoker in homes that have glass appliances. I know what it's like to live with smokers. I think my asthma decreased significantly when my father was finally forced not to smoke in the house. And so I can see the benefits of that right away. We decreased smoking. Well, before that, we got all the advertisements telling us that natural gas is clean, and we're finding out that it isn't. We decreased smoking 20 years ago by banning ads, and it proved successful. It made a younger generation realize the problem, and now it's not even questioned. It can work for fossil fuel ads too. Let's have Ottawa lead the way in banning fossil fuel ads. Our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and ourselves need a city where we will not have to fight to breathe clean air. It is good for the environment, and it's good for the city as well. Ban fossil fuel ads. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll go next to Dr. Sarah Charon.
Hi, yes, thank you. My name is Dr. Sarah Sharon, and I'm here today representing a climate advocacy group called For Our Kids Ottawa Gatineau, much like Dr. Waters, who spoke just a couple of delegates before me. I'm also a resident of Mr. Brockington's ward here in Ottawa and a concerned parent. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share my concerns. I'm here today to lend my voice, like so many of us have, to the important issue regarding the proposed sponsorship policy and advertising using city assets and programs policy. I would urge the council to add an additional condition to both of these policies, that the city will not enter into sponsorship agreements with external parties that either produce, distribute, or promote fossil fuels. And likewise, the city will not enter into advertising agreements with parties that either promote, distribute, or produce fossil fuels. My own son, is 8 years old, and he already suffers from climate anxiety. And I know we've heard a little bit about this. Already in his short life, he's experienced many extreme weather events here in Ottawa that have affected his quality of life. Multi-day power outages, not being able to play outside from the wildfire smoke, tornadoes. Every time now that we have a cloudy, rainy day, he asks me if there's going to be a tornado. And during our recent thunderstorm in February, he couldn't sleep because he was so afraid. He understands, as do many children and youth, that climate change is behind all of these things, and that our use of fossil fuels is the main driver of these problems impacting everyday aspects of day-to-day life. For him to go to a City of Ottawa facility and see an advertisement for a fossil fuel company or attend an event sponsored by a fossil fuel company would only further deepen his anxiety. For the city to accept and allow these advertisements and sponsorships sends a message to these kids and everyone really that climate change is not as important as short-term revenue. The city has already banned the advertising and promotion and sponsorship from tobacco companies because of the harm that does. And this is no different. Fossil fuel companies are scrambling. They are scrambling right now to promote and advertise their products. And this is mainly done, like we've heard, by greenwashing and spreading misinformation. We need to say no to this and to not allow these messages to be seen at our city facilities or online on our city websites. Later is too late to take climate action, plain and simple. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation, Sarah. Just if I could revisit a moment of your presentation, you had two very specific and clear prohibitions of the types of entities who you'd like to keep from advertising. Could you repeat those, please?
Yeah, so I honestly, when I read the two documents, like the two standards or policies that were being approved, I literally copied and pasted what you guys have in there now about the tobaccos and just put in fossil fuels. So it's listed under the conditions in these policies. That the city will not enter into sponsorship agreements with external parties that either produce, distribute, or promote fossil fuels. And likewise, the city will not enter into advertising agreements with parties that either promote, distribute, or produce, distribute, or promote fossil fuels. So I just took that language right out of the two documents that were included with the meeting, and I think it should just be put right in there, right underneath the tobacco.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll go next to Shana Quinnell. Shana Quinnell.
I'll give a moment for everyone. I'll do my comment in French. I'll give a moment for everyone to put their translation if they need to. Bonjour, je me présente, je m'appelle Shana Quinnell. Je suis une résidente du quartier Somerset. Je suis actuellement une étudiante à l'Université d'Ottawa où je suis aussi la coprésidente du groupe Justice climatique U-Ottawa. Il est souvent dit que la plus grande préoccupation de ma génération est la crise climatique et je peux vous parler d'expériences personnelles et avec mes nombreuses expériences avec les étudiants sur mon campus en tant qu'activiste climatique que cela est vrai. Imaginez donc la colère que je ressens via ma ville et ma mairie à chaque fois que je vois des publicités qui est pro-industrie du pétrole et du gaz dans notre ville. Bien que je félicite la ville d'Ottawa d'avoir déclaré une urgence climatique en 2019, sa promesse d'éliminer son utilisation des combustibles fossiles par 2050 et pour sa signature du traité de non-prolifération en 2022, il m'est impossible de ne pas remettre en question leur dédication à ces déclarations et promesses lorsque je vois des publicités pro-combustibles fossiles dans mon quotidien. Je ne sais pas si mon conseil municipal est conscient que ces affiches sont achetées par Canadian Action, qui est un groupe qui prétend être un groupe populaire, mais qui, selon un article du Norwell publié en 2020, Canadian Action a reçu plus de 100 000 $ par RSA Resources dans le passé, qui est une compagnie de combustibles fossiles, en plus d'avoir reçu du financement du Parti conservateur du Canada. Je vous encourage donc de refuser le médiocre estimé 6 000 à 10 000 $ que ces affiches pour démontrer votre dédication à votre dévouement, à vos promesses et vos déclarations climatiques. Le revenu perdu remis en contexte, du coup, des changements climatiques qui retombent sur la ville ne représentent rien. L'industrie touristique à Ottawa est particulièrement touchée par la crise climatique, en particulier les fermetures prolongées du canal Rideau et son impact négatif sur la Val des Neiges sont que quelques exemples. Les inondations, les derecho, les tornades et les feux de forêt et leur fumée ont non seulement un effet négatif sur le bien-être de la santé des citoyens, mais coûte cher et va continuer de coûter cher à la ville d'Ottawa. La ville va devoir payer des millions de dollars en frais d'infrastructure, d'assurance et en termes de soins de santé à ses citoyens dans le futur. L'industrie du pétrole et du gaz a une longue histoire de dénier et de cacher l'effet dévastateur des combustibles fossiles et de permettre ces affiches dans notre ville permet la prolifération des désinformations sur le sujet. Ceci rappelle évidemment l'industrie du tabac qui a dénié pendant des décennies l'impact négatif de leurs produits. Je crois qu'une même approche appliquée aux publicités de tabac devrait être appliquée sur les publicités pro-combustibles fossiles, donc on devrait les bannir. Les publicités pro-tabac sont bannies pour la santé publique. La pollution de l'air causée par les combustibles fossiles cause des millions de morts prématurées au niveau global à cause de l'augmentation des maladies respiratoires, cardiovasculaires et du cancer. Donc, ça serait logique que le même ban soit mis sur les publicités pro-combustibles fossiles. Alors que la ville a une politique qui ne permet pas les publicités de mettre des publicités faisant la promotion de produits mettant la vie en danger, la permission d'affichage de publicité pro-industrie combustible fossile dénie les dangers des changements climatiques. Je ne crois pas que la ville aurait permettrait encore aujourd'hui des publicités qui dénient les dangers du coronavirus. Alors pourquoi permettre des publicités qui dénient les dangers des combustibles fossiles et du même coup de la crise climatique? Comme le coronavirus, la crise climatique est aussi une crise urgente. Cette publicité va aussi contre l'engagement en faveur de l'équité annoncé dans le nouveau plan officiel, puisque les citoyens les plus touchés par les effets de l'industrie des combustibles fossiles et des changements climatiques sont de manière disproportionnée les personnes âgées, les enfants et les citoyens à faible revenu. Il serait naïf de la part de la Ville de croire que ces affiches ne nient pas à leur réputation, alors que la Ville a aussi une politique qui ne permet pas les publicités qui pourraient mettre en danger leur réputation. Je vous promets que l'ironie de ces affiches, d'être sur des arrêts de bus et d'être sur des bus, est discutée et l'ironie n'est pas perdue du tout. L'interdiction des publicités pro-combustibles fossiles permettrait à la Ville de démontrer qu'elle priorise non seulement la crise climatique, mais aussi la santé de ses citoyens et des citoyennes et leur dédication à l'équité. Je vous encourage donc à prendre action et à soutenir cette motion. Merci.
OK, merci pour cette présentation. Next is Emma Bider.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay. I can't see the timer. I don't know if that's...
The timer's not working at the moment.
Oh, okay.
So we'll try to get that fixed.
Okay, well, I'll do my best not to...
There it goes.
There we go.
There it goes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Apologies for not being able to be with you in person. I am here speaking on behalf of Climate Justice Ottawa, and Climate Justice Ottawa is in favor of banning fossil fuel ads in city facilities. I think we can all agree, and many speakers have already said, having fossil fuel ads in our facilities is not aligned with Ottawa's values, nor its mission, as has been stated in many of its policies, its declarations of a climate emergency, and also its programs that are encouraging people to transition away from fossil fuels. In fact, to do these things, to have these climate policies that are exciting and should be engendering hope, at the same time as providing these spaces for fossil fuel ads is a bit hypocritical. So I think that we can find ways to better align the advertising policies of the City of Ottawa with its existing programs and its mission to be the most livable city, mid-level city in North America. I think many people have mentioned the cost is certainly not worth it. The ads on hockey arena billboards was something like $5,459. Just to put that in perspective, you could not rent an apartment in Ottawa for $5,459 for 3 months. That's not very much money. Toronto Star recently put something out where the cost of car ownership is $1,300 a month. So you also couldn't really drive a car for 5 months with $5,459. This is a drop in the bucket of Ottawa's enormous municipal budget. And I guess it's In fact, such a small amount that in theory, Climate Justice Ottawa, a group with no paid staff that's run entirely by volunteers and has almost no funding, could probably fundraise money to put an ad there. This is a small amount of money. And despite the fact that it is a small amount of money that the city gets from this deal, it's an enormous benefit to these oil and gas companies. And why is that? What are they doing here? We're not a city that is an oil and gas city. We're not Calgary. We're not Edmonton. Why are they here? One of the advertisements says global oil and gas demand is growing. Here are some other consumer items that are growing in demand. Designer ball pythons, generative AI art, and Ozempic. The difference between those three things and oil and gas is that I, in theory, could buy all those things. I can't go to Home Depot and buy a barrel of oil, which raises the question about, like, what is this advertising? I would go as far to say that this is not an advertisement. This is lobbying. And these oil and gas companies are using the City of Ottawa's facilities as platform for lobbying federal politicians and policymakers. In the strategic development strategy conversation, or the economic development strategy conversation this committee just had, there was a lot of discussion about our role and relationship with the federal government. I don't think we need to act as a platform for lobbyists who want an easy and cheap way to get their message across to federal politicians. Lastly, there's been a lot of discussion about health, and certainly that's a major factor. We know that fossil fuel emissions in our atmosphere cause climate change, which leads to all kinds of negative health. It also impacts our infrastructure. It also harms our streets in our houses and costs us millions of dollars. In addition to the health risks, there's also the integrity of our streetscapes. If you think of integrity as a term that is defined as the wholeness or unity of our infrastructure, those things are being damaged and seriously harmed by the impacts of fossil fuels as well. So I think it's worth thinking about that provision. And lastly, from a personal standpoint, I know that those ads directly affect my health, because every time I see them, my blood pressure goes up and it makes me really angry. And I shudder to think about the state of my heart health if these things should remain up in our downtown areas, in our hockey arenas, and on our buses. So thank you very much. Once again, CJO is in favor of banning fossil fuel ads on city facilities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next presentation is from Robert Lyman. Robert Lyman, if you're ready.
Yes, I am. Fine. Thank you very much. Mayor Sutcliffe, honorable councilors, ladies and gentlemen. As I say, my name is Robert Lyman, and I wish to address the proposal that was submitted by 6 climate activist organizations that the City of Ottawa prohibit the advertisement and promotion of fossil fuels and sponsorship by fossil fuel companies in City of Ottawa facilities. And the related proposal that the policy include consideration of lowering GHG emissions or prohibiting those advertisements. I am a retired energy economist who has spent over 40 years analyzing, advising, and writing about energy, transportation, and environmental policy issues, mostly as a federal government official. In other words, I'm the only person who you will be speaking to today who actually has experience in economics, policy, and scientific issues associated with this, and I reside in Ottawa. The proposal before the committee is based upon 3 false claims. These are that the use of hydrocarbon fuels in Ottawa will have adverse climate effects, that advertising by companies that sell hydrocarbons will somehow increase adverse weather, and that allowing such advertisement will harm Ottawa's reputation and values. I would remind the committee that climate change is a global, not a local phenomenon, partially caused by the buildup in the atmosphere of higher concentrations of greenhouse gases, or GHGs. Ottawa produces less than 1% of Canada's GHGs, and Canada produces 1.5% of the global GHGs. In other words, Ottawa's share of the world emissions is 0.015%. Totally eliminating Ottawa's emissions would have no effect on global emissions or temperatures, or effects that are far too small to measure. Thus, the action that Council is being asked to take has nothing to do with climate change or saving the planet. It's simply an attack on oil and gas companies and the people that they serve. This is doubly the case with respect to Ottawa's emissions on global weather patterns and extreme weather events. As background, in the 32 years that governments have been meeting internationally to discuss emissions reductions, global emissions have increased by 60%. 2/3 of current emissions are produced by the developing countries, whose primary interest is in increasing the economic development and standard of living of their people. Canada's emissions policies have had no discernible effect on the consumption of greenhouse gas emissions in those countries, and there's no reason to believe that will change in future. The 6 environmentalist organizations implicitly question the values of the companies that produce and sell hydrocarbons. In effect, they are also questioning the values of the Ottawa residents who buy and use oil and gas for mobility, home heating, cooking, and electricity generation. Residents do so because hydrocarbons offer the most secure, reliable, and affordable sources of energy. Oil and gas produces the energy and feedstocks that enable the production and sale of things like pharmaceuticals, diagnostic equipment, antiseptics, lubricants, refrigerants, and cell phones. Add on wind turbines and photovoltaic cells, if you wish, and over 6,000 other products that Ottawa residents use. I've heard today that there's a comparison to be made between emissions of greenhouse gases and smoking. Smoking is an individual thing in which the person inhales an adverse substance. Carbon dioxide is not a harmful substance. Every time that one of you exhales, you exhale 4,000 parts per million of carbon dioxide. 40,000 parts per million of carbon dioxide. I strongly urge Council to take into consideration the adverse effects that banning advertising would have upon the message that a general public needs to have, and that is that we need to make sound economic and good policy decisions rather than banning advertising and restricting people's freedom of speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyman. We'll move on to the next presentation by Cecile Wilson, which is also online. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. I'm having some trouble with my camera. I'd like to thank you, Mayor, and members of the committee for this opportunity to speak before you today. I kind of wish I had known who was preceding me, because I do have some responses, but I think it would be good to think them out clearly. So I'm going to go ahead with my original presentation. I would like to convey, I also want to say thank you all the councillors. This is a tough job. And what the previous speaker has said has sort of showed out that you have a lot of things that you have to take into consideration. So I appreciate your efforts to do so fairly and for the good of the City of Ottawa. I'd like to convey my dismay at seeing the pro-fossil fuel ads on city infrastructure. I'm dismayed, first of all, because support for fossil fuels goes counter to the city's declaration of a climate emergency and its commitment to the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And secondly, because it undermines trust in the sincerity and integrity of the city's climate action plans. The ads from Canada Action are currently occupying bus shelters around the city are literal examples of greenwashing, which is defined as, quote, misleading or deceptive publicity disseminated by an organization so as to present an environmentally responsible image, end quote. These ads use a bright green color as the background for their text. And since the color green has strong associations with nature, vegetation, and sustainability, when this green background is juxtaposed with the white lettering of LNG, or liquid so-called natural gas, oil and natural gas reduce global emissions and our energy helps, it forms an association between oil and gas emissions and sustainability in the mind of the viewer. With this kind of strategy, the fossil fuel industry is switching its approach from a denial stance to one where it positions itself as on board with the fight against climate change. Oil and gas companies realize that most Canadians want effective action on climate, so they are repositioning themselves as climate champions rather than climate villains. And as an organization that overwhelmingly supports oil and gas, Canada Action is also adopting this stance. What is deceptive about these ads is that they imply oil and gas are clean, green, and helpful for meeting our climate goals. In truth, the vast majority of scientists who study the Earth's climate systems attribute climate destabilization to humanity's use of fossil fuels, especially the burning of these fuels. Natural gas is mostly methane, and that is up to 80 times more destructive than CO2 to the Earth's climate. The connection between the extraction, refining, transportation, and burning of fossil fuels, climate destabilization, and the likelihood of extreme weather events needs to be clear and unambiguous. Ottawa cannot meet its greenhouse gas emission reduction goals unless it reduces the amount of fossil fuels that it burns. Allowing the promotion of fossil fuel ads in city-owned venues sends a conflicting message about the seriousness of the climate emergency and the most effective means for reaching Ottawa's zero carbon emission goals. These ads also reflect negatively on the city's public image. Ottawa is the capital of Canada and should be a leader for the rest of the country, demonstrating effective ways of protecting the health and security of its residents and its infrastructure and economy from the worst effects of climate breakdown. If City Council continues to allow fossil fuel ads at its facilities and on its infrastructure, it raises doubts as to whether the Council is wholeheartedly committed to implementing its climate action plan. How can we expect residents to give the plan its full support if Council's support is unclear? The city already bans advertisements of tobacco products because of tobacco's negative effects on health. The use of fossil fuels has a negative effect on both personal and collective level of health through pollution and as a driver of severe weather events. We've already seen all the damages people have mentioned. I'm concerned this year about drought, about a very low level of snow cover, what that's doing to the plants and the animals, how they're going to come through this winter. A ban on fossil fuel advertising would be consistent with the city's intent to protect the health and well-being of Ottawa's residents, infrastructure, and economy. Please support a ban on fossil fuel ads and sponsorship at city facilities and on city infrastructure. We need hope, and hope requires action. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll go next to Gemma Patey.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the committee for this opportunity to speak on the importance of adopting the proposed motion to ban fossil fuel advertisements in the City of Ottawa. As many other folks have provided some brilliant explanations and rationale as to why this is so important, I want to take a moment and share the perspective from myself. So as a young person in Ottawa who is very climate conscious, like most other young people, the climate crisis is top of mind, is at the forefront of many of the big decisions that we're making and how we're envisioning our future. The climate crisis is hitting home in Ottawa very deeply, and I think we've felt these effects quite increasing over the past couple of years. So this past summer, I had the opportunity to work with Ecology Ottawa's Breathe Easy project, which is a project monitoring the air quality across the city during the summer months. Especially this year, it is very telling how Ottawa is not immune from the climate crisis when it comes to air quality, especially from forest fires. 2023 saw the largest area ever burned in a year during Canada's worst wildfire season ever recorded. And the people who are most vulnerable are bearing the burden of poor air quality in our city. And when we're thinking about responsibility, big oil and the fossil fuel industry in particular are the largest contributors to accelerating the climate crisis in Canada. In my day-to-day work, I'm leading a research project on getting youth involved in the clean energy industry. And for many of the youth that I'm speaking with, they're always bringing up the prominence of oil and gas and just how much of an influence that oil and gas has on the energy sphere, in recruitment in their universities, and specifically in advertisements. And living in Centertown, that resonates for me. I'm confronted daily with advertisements from big oil in public spaces. When I'm on buses, on billboards, when I'm walking into work, when I'm getting groceries, every day, no matter where I look, I can see an advertisement that is promoting fossil fuels on City of Ottawa property. So City Council must prohibit fossil fuel promotion and ads in any public city facilities, as allowing these advertisements to continue is in direct opposition to Ottawa's climate commitments. In 2019, Ottawa declared a climate emergency and has since signed agreements that have made commitments to reduce the reliance on oil and gas to fuel our communities and instead switch to clean and renewable energy forms. But to allow the continuance of fossil fuel industry to continue to run ads is directly counter to these promises and commitments made by the City of Ottawa. Ottawa is home to a lot of lobbying due to being the center of Canada's government. This means that the City of Ottawa needs to be more aware and diligent in protecting against potential harms that can come from large corporate interest groups and misinformation that can be spread to Ottawa's communities. It's a responsibility of City Council to make sure that harmful information or blatant disinformation is not made accessible and endorsed by the City of Ottawa. To allow this to continue is to put Ottawans at risk. The issue of advertisement also cannot be removed from greater environments and ecosystems that we find ourselves in. The climate crisis is requiring rapid, bold shifts and changes at the local level that will have ripple effects and tangible impacts in our community, in our air, and in our country. Lastly, the levels of trust that young people have for city governments cannot be left to the sidelines. As previously mentioned by another delegation, municipal governments have the highest levels of trust from citizens. Young people in particular are a community that has continuously expressed distrust and disapproval in choices made by politicians. This is especially needed when these choices are directly counter to what young people are asking for. The opportunity to show young people that they are taking serious steps to be in responsibility for climate action is here within adopting this motion to ban fossil fuel advertisements. To commit to banning fossil fuel advertisements on public property in Ottawa would show that you are committing to the people of Ottawa, our health, our interests, and our environment. It's a part of the City of Ottawa's responsibility to make sure that they're prioritizing people over profits of the fossil fuel industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. That concludes the public delegations. So if members of the committee have any comments or questions for staff, if not, we can vote on the motion. Is the motion carried? And the item is amended. Is that carried? Okay. Moving to the end of our agenda. There are no notices of motion for consideration at a subsequent meeting. There are no inquiries. Is there any other business? Motion to adjourn? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Merci beaucoup.